For those who are joining for the Keating Channel Pedestrian Bridge, we're just going to do general business first.
Okay, we were now in public session, and I'll walk through our agenda. First of all, I'll read our land acknowledgement. Waterfront Toronto acknowledges that the land upon which they're undertaking our revitalization efforts is part of the traditional territory of the Mississaugas, Credit First Nation, and that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. In addition, Waterfront Toronto acknowledges that Toronto has historically been a gathering place for many Indigenous people, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples today. So officially open the public session and welcome everyone, and those who may be joining us online. Remind you that this session is being recorded and will be posted on the Waterfront Toronto website. The first item of business that we have is the approval of the minutes that are before us. It would be from our April meeting. There's a proposal to make sure that the comments that were originally sent in a letter are absorbed and included in the traditional fashion into the body of the minutes. And once that's done, we will have that before us for signature and approval later today. But other than that, are there any other changes to the minutes that anybody wants to comment on or flag? No? Okay. So can I move a motion to adopt the minutes as amended with the change of the body of the comments from the letter being inserted into the actual minutes? That is what we're going to have officially before us for approval. The seconder, Bridget. All in favor? Aye. Great, thank you. Okay, review of today's agenda. Two items: Keating Channel Pedestrian Bridge for issues ID, no vote, and then secondly, West Onlands Block 13 schematic design. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest on panel members? Matthew.
I have a conflict for the Keating Channel Bridge.
Matthew on the Keating Channel. Is there anyone else?
Paul, online, I have to recuse myself from the Keating Channel.
Okay, Emily, you have a conflict? You are part of the competition?
Yes, I have a conflict because of the competition, but also because we are coordinating with the team as it.
Okay, anyone else? No? Okay, so Emily and Matthew, thank you. Waterfront Toronto updates. Pina is going to do that on Chris's behalf.
Sure. Leon, do we have some slides?
Yes. Yep.
So the first slide is about the new island precinct plan. As everybody, I think, is aware, the precinct plan amendments and the zoning bylaw are before council as part of the council meeting this month, and what has been put forward has many changes that reflect input from the public as well as the input around this table, as well as the fact that there is a public realm process to design the public realm that has not yet initiated, but that will start later on this year. So quick update since the April meeting. Next slide. We have been very busy lake filling the Parliament slip just east of our new offices to allow for Queens Quay to extend east and the Waterfront East LRT to extend east to meet with Cherry. This will also allow for the realignment of Parliament Street. These are critical infrastructure projects, not only for the Waterfront East LRT and the extension of Queens Quay, but also for the redevelopment of the Quayside precinct, as removing the existing alignment of Queens Quay and Parliament is necessary in order to normalize the blocks for that development. We're now 100% complete lake filling, and we're moving into the next phase of work to settle that lake fill, etc. We're expecting to be completed this work by fall of this year. And then we'll start on with the public realm and the creation of the new streets in this area. Next slide.
So two updates here on public art.
Yeah, so from a public art perspective, the first one is around the Equilibrium project. This is now under construction, and this will be officially unveiled as part of the opening of the AHT building in the West Outlands. Next slide, the floating art piece. This is a program Waterfront Toronto's been doing for quite some time, installing floating art in Harbor Square Basin. We recently launched this piece here in the basin. It is a project that's about reuse and has 356 plastic bottles tied together, within which there are messages, poems, drawings, etc., from people to the water. It's a pretty lovely piece that we launched earlier this month. Next slide. Leon, do you want to talk about the tentative
Sure.
agenda?
Yeah, so tentatively for July, we will see the McClary District Precinct Plan return for Stage 2 preliminary draft plan review. We also have on the agenda Waterfront East LRT, the Queens Quay East segment, and Young Slip coming back for detailed design, and potentially waterfront accessibility framework. This is a for information item. And for September, Waterfront East LRT 2A segment, also for detailed design. McClary District is slated to come back for their final review before the end of the year. That may be September or October. And then we will begin the new project, Keating Channel East Precinct Plan at Stage 1 Issues ID. So that's what we're looking at for the next 2 months. Of course, we don't have a meeting in August because that is our summer break. And I think that is it for the general business.
Yep, okay, thank you, Leon. We're just 10 minutes behind. I think we're good. So are there people waiting outside? We could bring them in now?
No.
Or- Nobody's there? They're all online?
Yeah, I think the design team are online. Anna, who is our project manager, I think will be presenting the staff intro.
And if you want to come up and start that, I can.
Just before that, Anna, Pina, I think David's in your actual waiting room.
Yes.
Oh, you're here. Okay, sorry, I can't see.
All right.
And as part of the introduction, just introducing the team as well, because a lot of them are virtual.
Sure. no
Okay,
problem.
Anna, you ready?
Absolutely. Leon, would it be possible for you to share those slides and then I can speak to them? Is that okay?
Sure, yeah, let me bring that up, yeah.
Sick, thanks. So hello, everyone. My name is Anna Ingebrigtsen.
Can everybody hear? Because it's, I don't know if we can turn the mics up a bit or.
Oh, I thought I was speaking so loud, but I can.
Presenters want to come up here.
Yeah, you want to come here?
Speak up. Okay, sure.
Sure.
I will see if I can get a mic, but I don't think we can change.
I thought you could turn them up or something. In the room.
Bear with us, this is part of the moving.
Yeah.
This
It's
room
it's
is-
good online. We can hear you well.
Yeah. Let's want to make sure everybody can hear.
Yeah, that's perfect, Anna. Yeah, just grab a seat at the front with your laptop. I'll share, but you can still look at the slides on your own computer. Yeah.
Can you hear me okay? Is that a little better?
Yes.
Great. Hi everyone, my name is Anna Ingebrigtsen. I'm the Senior Project Manager of Design here at Waterfront Toronto and managing the day-to-day activities for the Keating Channel Pedestrian Bridge project. I think we'll start with the introduction of the team. Here we have David Collins, who is the partner in charge at Seidler for the local architect on record for the project. And then why don't I move over to Wilkinson Air. Dominique, would you like to introduce yourself, and then we can just go around with the project team?
Thanks, Anna. Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dominic Bettison. I'm design partner at Wilkinson Air with the Design Architects.
Hi everyone, I'm Elliot Krauser, also with the Design Architects. I'll hand over to Chris.
I'm Chris Palmer. I'm a partner at Plant Architects, and we are the landscape lead on this project.
Okay, was there anyone else on the call from the design team?
Do we have Brian from Two Row?
Is Eric online?
Eric couldn't make it today, but I understand Brian's gonna attend in his absence.
Why don't you get going? Why don't you guys get going, guys, and I'll find Brian.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, Anna, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. If you can go to the first slide, please, Leon.
Yep, just changed it. Give it a second.
Thank you. So the Keating Channel Pedestrian Bridge project consists of the design and construction of a bridge crossing Keating Channel between Quayside and the new island of the Portlands. A couple sort of like high level stats are the span of the bridge is approximately 100 meters. The minimum vertical and horizontal clearances are required. This has been under coordination with Ports Toronto for some time, known as the navigable conveyance envelope. This allows for marine vessels to continue to work under their activities through the Keating Channel. Also protects for regulatory flood flows. This is an active transportation bridge. The funding does come in part from the federal government active transportation fund, and as such must be fully accessible to accommodate various modes of transportation. The scope, of course, is structural infrastructure, surface treatments, potential integrated softscaping, lighting, furnishings, signage, and wayfinding, as well as an interim trail through the South Landing, and we'll get to that in a moment. The North and South Landings, which we'll also be covering briefly, fall in Quayside and the future island in the Portlands. Both are being studied for interim connections, uses, and optimal integration. And also important to note that this project is committed to working in collaboration with MCFN and other Indigenous communities throughout the entire process of the project. And we understand this to be through sort of process and placemaking as part of this project. So next slide. Thanks, Leon. The project goals were developed in partnership with our project partners at the City of Toronto and as well MCFN and the Community Advisory Committee. And so we identified 6 key project goals in the RFQ and the RFP for the design team to respond to. We are looking for something that is beautiful, distinct, and complements the existing family of bridges. A bridge that supports active transportation by providing safe, direct, and equitable access between the city and the new island at the Portlands. Something which incorporates and integrates with landscape, biodiversity, and ecosystem resilience where possible. Includes Indigenous voice in both the process and the design and supports Indigenous placemaking and placekeeping. Demonstrates sustainability and innovation. And last but not least, offers an inclusive, accessible, comfortable experience for all people of all ages and all abilities. Next slide, please. So some site context for everyone, just go through a few slides to sort of refresh everyone's memory. This map illustrates the precinct plans that make up the immediate context surrounding the future bridge. We can see here how important the bridge is in providing clear, direct, and safe access from the downtown and Quayside to the Portlands. So we're looking at Parliament Slip, Quayside, PLFP, Villiers Island, the Keating Channel Precinct Plan, Gardner Expressway, and Lakeshore Boulevard East reconfiguration. So lots of busy work happening here, this being kind of the elbow to connect it all. Next slide, please. So just an existing conditions map. So we can help sort of orient ourselves. The red outline is the project boundary as identified in the procurement process. So the location of the future bridge is really just at the northeast end of the Toronto Inner Harbor and at the mouth of the Keating Channel, which acts as an outlet to the Don River. Existing key context includes Queens Quay, the Martin Goodman Trail, the Water's Edge Promenade, East Bayfront, Parliament Slip lake filling, and of course, most immediately is currently 333 Lakeshore Boulevard East, which is a parking lot. And to the south, Cherry Street lake filling, Cherry Street, and the works of enabling infrastructure for PLFP. Next slide, thanks, Leon. Future site context. So here we're kind of seeing a potential future build out of these communities. So we're looking at a more developed quayside, Parliament Slip, various mixed use developments, cultural institutional centers, potential future, look of Promontory Park North, Promontory Park South, Destination Play Park, new roads and bridges, and so on. Next slide, please. So we'll just go through those landing sites at the north and south, just in a little bit more detail. And so the north landing site of the bridge will integrate immediately with the Water's Edge Promenade. And this will be coordinated with the development of the dock wall and Parliament Slip. The south landing will integrate with the future Promontory Park North, as I was just saying, and there will be an interim trail that will connect through this site down to the circulation networks of Promontory Park South. So it's sort of a meanwhile solution. There will be a temporary trail to ensure that there will be direct access. Next slide, please. So here's a few existing site photos of the North Landing site. We can see it's a pretty hard, more urban edge, lots of concrete, asphalt, the sort of post-industrial side, if you will. And if we go ahead to the next slide, we can see some of the illustrations of the sort of future build out and vision for Quayside and Parliament Slip. And as well in the bottom right corner, we can see one of the latest submissions for the Water's Edge Promenade in plan. So you can start to see the immediate context that the bridge will be integrating with. Next slide, please. So moving on to the south landing site, again, we have some existing site photos from about this time last year. It's much more of a natural, sort of softer landscape that we'll be integrating with. We've got the revetment, the trees, and the stormwater swale that is being removed currently in advance of the construction of the bridge. On to the next slide. We can see a couple illustrations of the sort of potential future build out of the South Landing site. And so we see, an artist's rendering illustration of how Promontory Park might look. Of course, this project is currently unfunded, but it is expected to accommodate a number of interim activation uses in advance of it becoming this park. And as well, we expect to see cultural institutions and of course, the larger sort of development of the island of the Portlands. And so just to note that was not the design has not been designed, but we expect something of that kind to emerge in the years to come. And so next slide, we're going to take a quick look at the cycling network. Being that this is an active transportation bridge, we acknowledge that it is important to support all kinds of active transportation. And so as part of that, also important to note that the bridge is not, in fact, connecting cycling facilities on either landing. So cyclists who are looking for a dedicated, separated bike lane will be encouraged to use the Cherry Street North Bridge, which is the Martin Goodman Trail, and the greater sort of circulation network. And it is in fact connecting parkland to parkland. So it's sort of a place for everybody, and certainly cyclists, wheelers, modes of transportation are encouraged. But of course, multi-use spaces can be challenging. So this was identified early on by the Community Advisory Committee as a key design challenge to work through closely and carefully. Asking questions like how the bridge's active transportation facilities are designed, whether there should be mixed-use circulation path, delineated lanes, how do we manage for speed, different modes of traffic, how do we prevent conflict and provide clarity and safety for all users. These are key priorities. And so just wrapping up on the intro slides here. Next slide, please, Leon. So an evaluation committee consisting of Waterfront Toronto, the City of Toronto, Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, reviewed the submissions and considered the input from technical advisors, our Community Advisory Committee, Indigenous communities, and the broader public. The Equinox Bridge was selected as having achieved in spectacular ways all of the various project goals that we had, the 6 project goals, and really impressing the evaluation committee in doing so in a very innovative way. And so some of these include the utilization of the S form. And for those of you in the room, we have a physical model that you can take a look at right here. Now, this is the competition entry. So of course the bridge has, developed since then, but you can really see the sort of spanning S shape of the bridge. And as that's beautiful and aesthetic and poetic and sculptural, it also achieves a number of very important challenges. One of those being addressing different sort of grade changes. It's also a traffic calming measure. Exceptional ways of having sort of crossover multi-use space, and provides these sort of beautiful pausing, resting noses, as we've been referring to them, on either side of the bridge facing east and west. The bridge provides accessible places to pause, as I was just saying, and it gets lower to the water and invites people sort of get closer to the water and to sort of not just use this as a place to move through, but also to stop and rest and enjoy the view and gather and be together. There's an extremely strong Indigenous cultural overlay and design integration within the design of this bridge, which particularly impressed the evaluation team. The design team will get into that later, and we're really excited to share that with you. And of course, there's a number of sustainability strategies, including low carbon and local materials, green technologies, and integrating windbreaks within the design of the bridge itself. So we're going to share the timeline. It's quite high level. I think important to note that as part of the funding agreement from the federal government, it was stipulated that this bridge is to be open and in operation by the end of March 2026. And so that's what's really sort of governed this timeline. Also important to note that the building the foundation for this bridge has been ongoing for quite some time already. And so you can see the sort of work that we've completed in gray. And we started work on SD earlier this year, and we're just very close to nearing the end of SD now. And from there, of course, moving swiftly into DD and hoping for some sequential tendering to sort of optimize the schedule, the construction schedule, to achieve this timeline. Next slide, please. This one is quick. We just wanted to touch on the fact that this is issues ID. There will not be a vote, as Pina was saying earlier, and that will sort of follow the DRP stream to public land. There's no votes today, but we expect to see you again in September. And this is our last slide now. And so I think the areas that we'd really like you to focus on today our relationship with the context and the integration with those landing sites, as well, of course, always looking for moments of design excellence and as well sustainability and resilience. So is the design well integrated with the context? Is there greater existing future public realm network that is being thought of when we're looking at those sort of punctuation moments? How is the relationship with the Water's Edge Promenade? And as you know, it's fairly well developed, the design of it at this point. And how is it sort of protecting for, you know, excellent future uses on the South Landing? How are accessibility and active transportation challenges being addressed? How can the design continue to evolve to meet the objectives of not just design excellence, but also continuing to achieve and interrogate and evolve through the project goals? Is the design aligned with the objectives and character of the other existing bridges? And does it sort of help support this unique family of bridges in this extraordinary district? And finally, are there any other strategies to consider for reducing embodied carbon emissions for the project? Anything else that should be studied at this point in the project? So those are some of the items that we'd love your input on. And thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Dominique, I believe.
Thanks, Anna. Yes, let me share my screen.
Thank you.
Okay, hopefully you can see the screen and hear me okay.
Yep, it's all good.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks for that introduction, Anna. And you set out a number of things that I was going to talk through, but perhaps if you bear with us, I'll go over some of those things briefly again. But just to introduce the team, again, kind of already introduced really, Zeidler's as the prime proponent. Us, Wilkinson Eyre, as the design lead, Arab leading the engineering, Plant on the landscape, and Turo, the indigenous consultant, with BTY as our cost consultant. As Anna said, there's 6 project goals that we are very mindful of, and we're hopeful that our bridge responded to all of those 6 project goals that we actually quite carefully drew out from the briefing documents and tried to respond to as strongly as we could in the submission we came up with. So clearly the first objective, creating a beautiful and distinctive gateway to the waterfront. You can see there top left. Clearly the bridge is about connectivity, so we have to be connecting it in a seamless fashion, in an efficient way, connecting the city and Villiers Island. Incorporate a living landscape, well, best as we can. We wanted to integrate landscape into the bridge and the bridge abutments, and to create a bridge that was designed collaboratively with input from the indigenous peoples and obviously reflect their culture and our shared values, and embody sustainable strategies and innovation, which you can see there in that middle slide. And then the last reel of those 6 goals was to create a place for all people, and again we believe we've achieved that. Sorry, the slides are advancing very slowly. Here we go. Right. Anna showed you some photographs of the site, clearly much better than our photographs, but just 2 images here to show you the really 2 different conditions that we find ourselves with in terms of where the bridge must cross to. So on the left hand side there, a view from Villiers Island, this naturalized condition with a softer edge, landscaping design for the park still being developed, with views across to the quayside, the promenade, post-industrial landscape. You can see the developments well underway there along the quayside and the city in the background. And on the right there, an image taken from the North Bank. That's the quay edge there, the promenade, decaying but being rebuilt. Does give technical challenges structurally, but you can see it's a completely different kind of context to that view in the distance to Villiers Island, which will become this beautifully landscaped park in due course. Hopefully it's advancing. So a bridge, all about connectivity. The aspirations of the project are to provide a pedestrian link from the Water's Edge Promenade, the quayside, that development on that south shore of the mainland, effectively, and connection back to the main to the city. Connecting all of that over the Keating Channel, over to Villiers Island and to Promontory Park. So an abutment into that Water's Edge Promenade to the north and into Villiers Island and the park to the south. And the bridge itself has to sit within a buildable constraint box that was provided to us by Waterfront Toronto as part of the competition. The bridge, as Anna said, is pedestrian, but it needs to allow for cyclists to use it. We're not looking to ban them, although we are obviously trying to direct cyclists over the Cherry Street Bridge further east. So in terms of the site analysis, if we look in section at the constraints of the site as we find it, on the left there is a section through the north bank, so the quayside and the promenade. On the right hand side, a section through Villiers Island, with the channel obviously separating the two. You can see that on the north bank there's a current datum for the promenade edge, 77.25. And if we go across to Promontory Park at Villiers Island, there is a level change. We're at about 80 plus 80 meters there. So we've got about 2.5 meter level change between the two, but also the bridge has to clear a navigable envelope that's been prescribed to us by Waterfront Toronto, and it's approximately 3 meter high envelope, and it's about 30 meters wide. And in fact, that navigable envelope has been refined further, and we're now looking to match the soffit of the Cherry Street Bridge bridges to the east. So a slight increase in the height of that navigable box that we're working to clear. So one of the challenges in the design of this bridge is to create certainly as we saw it, was to create a barrier-free bridge sequence that had really well-resolved abutments both to the north, to the quayside, but also to Villiers Park to the south. And it's you could imagine spanning the Keating Channel with just a very simple arch form, and looking to ramp up the bridge from the lower levels at the quayside and ramp the bridge up and over the navigable envelope and arrive at the upper level in Villiers Park. That sounds quite straightforward, but if we're to put a ramp in that complies with disabled requirements, 5% and other user groups, pushchairs, etc., then we're limited, as I say, to that 5% pitch, and it's very, very difficult to achieve a ramp solution that clears the channel as a straight line. Given that ramping requirement, you end up with a bridge that's very, very long. So one of the first things we looked at was to see whether if we set out a bridge diagonally across that buildable box, whether that would give us additional length to drive the bridge across the channel. In reality, what that does is it creates still a very large amount of embedment of the bridge into the promenade on the quayside, which in itself then creates a really strong physical barrier in the east-west direction, as you can see from this little diagram. So we realized straight away that doing a straight line crossing was going to be incredibly unsuccessful. An alternative strategy might be to say, well, we'd put the bridge where we would like it to be. It's a straight line potentially from A to B. When we ramp the bridge as much as we can, and then we introduce a sort of large tail, like a hockey stick, that allows us to ramp down to the quayside edge. And again, what what that does is it creates a physical barrier running in the east-west direction, which really severs the connectivity from the development to the north to the water's edge itself. So again, not ideal in terms of an architectural solution. So one way that you could think about it is to add extra length to the ramp by curving it. So this was the first strategy we looked at in terms of a curving concept. So the curve here looks to pick up the pedestrians in the most logical way to the most western point of the buildable box, and then curve the bridge deck in an easterly direction and bring it back onto the high point at Villiers Island. That does give you the right amount of ramp length and the 5% limiting ramp pitch. But as you can see, it does create a bridge with a very sort of monodirectional outlook, looking eastwards along the Keating Channel, and really turns its back onto the lake to the west. It is a structurally efficient solution, and it could be cost effective. But we still felt that there was potentially a better solution out there. So we looked at an S deck, and in this case, we looked to see whether that S deck could be supported by a series of masts, which could be quite playful and sculptural, and clearly has a sort of nautical theme to it. The S deck is very successful. What that does is it gives us additional deck length to allow the ramping and the levels to be mitigated, the level change to be mitigated between the quayside and the park. And it also creates, as Anna mentioned, two noses, effectively the corners of the S shapes themselves. So a series of a nose that faces westwards to the lake and addresses the lake, and eastwards along the Keating Channel itself. So very positive as a move. It also provides natural traffic calming for cyclists to mediate around that S-shaped deck. And as I say, it gives this equal importance to the viewing aspects from the bridge. However, introducing masts and piling into the river or into the channel itself creates complexity. It creates costs. It creates potential obstructions to river traffic, which all need to be dealt with. And it doesn't really tie into the family of bridges, importantly, that the Cherry Street bridges have so far defined with its masted structure. So we moved on to our sort of final solution, which was to retain the S-shaped deck, which for all the positive attributes that came with it, but to support the deck, which is nearly it's about 95 meter span. So to support that deck with an arch-shaped structure, which ties well into the family of bridges that have been set up by the Cherry Street bridges. And it has all the positive attributes of the deck alignment that I've talked you through: the creation of noses on the corners, the traffic calming, the sufficient deck length to mediate between the lower quayside, the promenade to the north, and the raised park to the south. The arch is structurally efficient and requires minimal steel. Again, a key client benchmark goals to really try and make an efficient and environmentally efficient, as well as efficient cost-wise piece of infrastructure. So we took that design forward as part of our concept design studies into design development, and we really liked and celebrated the notion that this could be a sculptural bridge. The arch form itself is an anti-funicular arch. We think this might be a world first, designing this with Arabs and using their extensive knowledge. They're not aware of a bridge of this nature, so potentially very much a landmark status in terms of its design. The sculptural nature of the arch and the cabling that are raised from it, again working with the idea of, or inspired by sculpture, the work of Nam Gabo, particularly the idea that cables, fine thread can define space and geometry and create really interesting three-dimensional spaces, was something that we were very interested in, and was part of this sort of playful sculptural aspirational design. So looking at the bridge from slightly raised elevation here from the south, you can see the S shape of the deck integrating nicely with the northern quay, so the promenade, and equally in a sinuous way integrating into that more fluid landscaped park of Villiers Island. And you can see there the arch form of the structure over the top of the deck, starting to form a really interesting dialogue with the Cherry Street bridges in the background. So turning to the plan, you can see that the S-shaped form allows a bridge to sit within the prescribed buildable boundaries of the site, the client's defined site. The northern abutment landing with the potential for an interesting new space that might address not only the Water's Edge Promenade, but also aspirations for an interesting building on the corner of this quayside development. And equally to the southern abutment, forming part of this fluid language of landscape that is being set up as part of Promontory Park. You can see from the plan the creation of these noses on the corners of the S shape, with integrated seating facing down into the lake, but equally down Keating Channel itself, and the arch over the top with the cable array connecting to the deck below. So a journey that isn't about a point-to-point relationship, a celebratory journey across the Keating Channel, so more than just a piece of infrastructure, a bridge that we see here is very sculptural in its nature, playful. It's about, as I say, a sort of celebration of that journey across from point A to point B, and creating places to stop, dwell, and get close to nature, admire nature, and really visual amenity for all. You can see here a view on the deck. So the cable array creates this really interesting gateway condition. So a gateway condition is set up both for users of the bridge leaving the city and arriving or advancing to Villiers Island, and vice versa, coming back from Villiers Island, a gateway to the quayside and to the city of Toronto on the northern bank. As part of the bridge design and part of the bridge deck, and the S-shaped design, we have to one side we have a perforate handrail design that allows for maximum visibility from the pedestrians to the water and to the landscape beyond. And on the opposite side of the deck, we have a slightly raised screen, which is perforated and provides wind protection. So it's slightly taller, and it's having done this on bridges before, it's very successful. The other two images you see there on the right hand side look to show a little bit of our initial thinking about how we might utilize these noses, these corners of the S-shaped bridge in plan. Creation of step seating that allows access down to a lowered area, which is perforate in its nature. The sort of interesting connection between that zone and the water itself, and the aspiration for users of the bridge to get as close to the water as feasible, and again, all part of this indigenous conversation we're having about connection to nature. The lower zone, this sort of perforated zone, is ramped, so that would allow users in wheelchairs and with pushchairs to also appreciate that water's edge connection. As well as you can see the integration of timber into that seating zone as really, we think, an appropriate material. That has advanced a bit further from those competition visuals. I can talk to you about that and update you on that in a second. So this is a plan of the bridge width at the competition stage, and we've been optimizing the bridge design over the course of scheme design and tuning both the bridge deck set out and also the arch above it to really maximize the efficiency of the interaction between the arch and the deck below, but also to create to deal with other issues. So you can see here the original competition deck profile edged in red, and really where we are now at this stage towards the end of SD with a narrower bridge. So a bridge now for the main pedestrian circulation deck reduced from 6 meters to 5 meters, but also a slightly more sinuous S-shaped deck, which allows us to get more deck length into the bridge itself, which helps to deal with that slight increase in the clearances that we needed to achieve during SD. And also we've taken the opportunity with this realignment to really help to refocus the noses, the seating on the corners of the S-shaped deck to really maximize the view out into the landscape. So on the left, where we were at the competition stage with the seating to the noses and the perforate zone to the water's edge above or below. On the right there, where we currently are, there's been a rationalization of that seating, a creation of a much more equitable access to both the seating and also to the lower zone, the perforate zone, for all user groups. And you can just see here on this little diagram really what we're trying to do. So this seating zone, the leading edge is lowered as far as we can to dip down towards the water. It's ramping downwards from the main bridge deck, and you can see that here if you can follow my cursor. There's a wheelchair user there, so that's fully accessible to wheelchair users. It's about 2.5 meters wide, so clearly a lot capacity for wheelchairs to pass and turn around is provided. And then the seating that sits to the back of it, now in a very similar way to we design sort of stadiums and big public event type buildings, integration of dedicated zones for wheelchair users to sit next to friends and other people as integrated as part of that seating zone. So this sort of jumbo seating, providing both seating potential but also a barrier from the main deck, pedestrian deck and cycle route behind, as you can see. So this has all got ongoing work and it's being constantly developed and tuned. In terms of the materiality, selection and sustainability, well, the two sort of go hand in hand. We want, and we've strive to select materials that are robust and have long lifespans. That's part of the sustainability of this project. So steel and stainless steel for structure and for handrails, and the part of the balustrading for the wind, etc. Timber, where we want to integrate seating and obviously much more comfortable to sit on timber rather than steel plate, and materials like wedge wire, which provide very good visibility through them, but also are perfectly good heel guard material. So there's no issues there with trapping of people's different types of shoes. So also as part of the strategy, the landscaping, very much part of the indigenous story and integration, indigenous planting. We're looking to use the planting for rainwater filtration. We're looking to source materials locally wherever possible. I've mentioned the low maintenance and high durability of any materials that we've been looking to select. As we look, that's another view of the bridge, really showing off in a way this kind of sculptural elements of the bridge, the way that the cables define space and gateways, both to the city and to the island, as I've already mentioned, and this kind of very distinctive, beautiful landmark bridge that we're aiming to provide you with. The indigenous conversation is been throughout. We've been working with Two Row from the competition stage. We've had workshops locally with indigenous leaders, and really from the very beginning the bridge has been integrated into that story. The idea that the bridge connects to the cardinal directions and to the sky, the water and the land. As you know, the bridge is called the Equinox Bridge, which really shows its connection. I'll come on to that in a second, but it really shows how we're looking to connect the bridge to the movement of the sun. So certainly moments set up that address the bridge, allow the bridge to address the summer and winter solstice, as well as the equinox, actually. We talked about the inclusion of the native planting at the abutments, connection to the water itself. I've mentioned a few times, and the sacredness of that to Indigenous peoples, places of seating, gathering spaces, and connection to one another important, and places to share stories, etc. A lot of this all driven by conversations with the elders and the MCFN. So I mentioned the kind of the way that the bridge is being set out, which is quite interesting. Its alignment. So this first diagram, sorry, it's a little bit, there's a lot going on here, but you can see that from point A here, this is a bridging plan. This is supposed to signify someone's viewing vantage point. So point A, really from this nose here of the bridge, really does give you a great view of the summer solstice sunrise. As we come to the other nose, which is point B, you can see that equally this gives a really good view of the winter solstice sunset. So two interesting connections there to the solstice. From point C, so the bridge itself, the sort of center line of the bridge runs through an alignment which aligns the bridge with the summer solstice at sunset. So you can see that there in that image. And the idea that the sun itself at a certain point is actually captured between the cable array emanating from the arch over the top of the deck. So that's point C looking northwards. Equally, point D for the winter equinox looking in the reverse. Again, there's an alignment running down through the bridge. And so there's sort of macro set out of the bridge to do with the movement of the sun throughout the year, and then playing with the potential to perforate the windscreen, the element, the slightly taller element to the deck that provides this wind shelter to pedestrian users, playing with the idea that we might be able to perforate that and shine light through it to create shadows onto the deck of the constellations, and notions of the deck, the underside of the deck itself, reflecting the water, the sparkle of the water into the deck, and almost giving the impression of the bridge having some life to it. So that's just a sort of conceptual view of the bridge from above, with the various constellations being shone onto the deck itself. These could be by projectors, if not through the balustrades themselves, but I like the idea of the balustrade by day having these interesting constellations engraved into them, and then at night a sort of different use for them as they're used to shine light through them. So it's quite interesting kind of day-night scenario. And equally, from the beginning, we've and in common with all the bridges we do, the bridge has to be distinctive at night, or at least we think the bridge has great potential to be very distinctively lit at night and create this landmark structure connecting Villiers and the city. So lighting of the arch and the cable array, I think, will be important, as well as a reading of this kind of sinuous deck alignment. How the bridge connects into the abutments, and as mentioned, as something that is of real interest to us as a team. The north connection, the competition stage, certainly form part of a bigger story where the landscape stepped down to the water in a series of planters and places to sit, as well as ramping, and the alignment was a sort of flush alignment between the deck and the water's edge. And that's just a section to show the bridge, and I'll come back to the south abutment in a second. That's just to show that the bridge meets the prescribed clearances and aligns with the Cherry Street soffit to the east, and you can see how the bridge is supported at those abutment points. We are working through with a series of options that's still very fluid, actually how that north abutment will work. we have a series of things that we're studying. And you can see here in this diagram, there's actually 4 options that we're looking at. First option really looks to bring the deck down and align fully with the current level for the promenade. We will need to do that with ramping, and we'll also be able to provide stairs to do that as well, so we can provide 2 types of connectivity. That does generate a slightly longer piece of construction here. You can see where I'm circling as we move from the end of the bridge proper at this 78.5 position down to the area noted as area 1, which would be the point where the bridge connects to the quayside level. Option 2 would look to slightly shorten the element of construction from the end of the bridge down to the actual waterfront's edge. That the decking can be shortened if we were to very gently raise the promenade up by about 500 millimeters. So that's the 77.75. So the benefit is, as I say, a shorter ramp as well as a stair combination. And we think that that could be done in a very kind of seamless and almost invisible way. Option 3 is an option which is a bit more fundamental. It actually looks to land the bridge onto the quayside edge itself, as you can see here.
So, sorry, Dominic.
Sorry, got that wrong.
Do you
That's
mind
option
if
4.
That's option 4. Option 3
Yes.
is just if we raise up the water's edge promenade locally by 1 meter rather than half a meter.
You're right. Yeah.
We then shorten the extension quite significantly. And then, yes, option 4 is the more radical version, whereby we look to land onto the promenade and get rid of any sort of land within the channel.
Thanks for straightening me out there, Elliot.
Sorry.
That's good. No, that's good. And then I mentioned the south connection. Really trying to get the bridge to integrate into the landscape in a very fluid way. Obviously, a flush abutment as well is what we're achieving or trying to achieve and achieving. So this was the south landing before the bridge, or is currently is, and then on the right there, our proposal to really tie the bridge into an adjustment to that landscaping. So it's sort of part of the fluid geometry of our bridge and the landscape design for this part of the island. So again, fluid connection and a connection that is at the same level, as you can see in that image on the left, where the transition between the landscape to Villiers is completely flush with the bridge deck itself. And on the right there, just to develop, that's really where we are at the moment. So refinement of the competition view that you can see on the left. So the right is what we think is a successful, very successful abutment detail. And you've seen that view before. Really last few images here. So view from the west, looking eastwards, the S-shaped deck, the connection between quayside and Villiers to the Villiers Island to the right, and then this sinuous deck, sinuous arch that forms over the top, this anti-funicular arch, forming this strong relationship with the Cherry Street bridges in the distance. And that was the last slide.
Wow. Wonderful. Thank you for a very thorough presentation. So we're going to move to the panel for any questions. Bridget, you want to start?
Sure. Thank you so much.
Nice to see you in person.
Nice to see you
Oh,
too.
sorry, I didn't my camera on.
Hi, my name is Bridget.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bridget.
Yes, so thank you so much for a really excellent presentation, and I think a really important contribution to this whole area. My question was really about the role of landscape. I mean, I think it was discussed as one of the key items, but I didn't really see a lot of it. And I know it's early stages, but I feel like it's such a key component and there's not a lot of land to work with. So it definitely is challenging. And I guess I didn't want it to be an afterthought. So I think it's more a question, especially during issues identification. And then I would say, I was asking about whether there was kind of really intense coordination with Promontory Park, because given that there's so many pieces that have been in the design process for quite some time. So I appreciated the images that you had about transition, but I just wanted to underline how critical that was. And then I guess I had a question about the north side, the north side, and what's planned for that? Is that a competition? Is that in the works? And how any transition would actually happen there? And then I guess the kind of other question I had was whether there was any opportunity to touch the water, either on the north or the south side. And that's kind of related to the issue of coordination with the proponents that are already in play.
Maybe I can.
She wants to just add something.
Great, thank you.
And before I do that, can we stop sharing the slide, Dominic? So we can see everybody's face much bigger.
That better?
I'll try to answer the bulk of your question.
Thank you.
First of all, with integration with Promontory Park North, PLFP has been designed, as you know, but Promontory Park North is not part of that scope at that time.
Right.
Emily's not on the call because we have engaged MVVA to assist the team in ensuring that as we land the bridge, it is landed in a way that the grades are planning ahead for the Promontory Park North design. We don't have a design, so we're trying to do it in a very thoughtful way in advance of a design. We hope to be getting going on the design of Promontory Park North as part of the next phase of the island, but at this moment, we don't have a design. The bridge is almost certainly going to come ahead of Promontory Park North, given the schedule associated with the funding. Therefore, the team has also been asked to design an interim connection to the main entrance of Promontory Park South at Center Street, so that when you get off the bridge, you get to our brand new park system in a really easy way. That's Promontory Park North. On the north side, the Water's Edge promenade that was shown by Anna, there was a CAD drawing in the intro slides, is being designed by Westate and DTAH as part of the Quayside project that was brought to the panel. It's at 90% design right now, or almost. It will be tomorrow. We're getting the draft submission. So this team and that team have been talking almost every day. This is Issues ID. So you're not seeing the sort of results of that process. But as was pointed out by Dominic, there are some challenging grade issues to resolve to ensure that we seamlessly integrate this into the Water's Edge Promenade, and we look for the panel's feedback on what's better or worse in terms of how we do that. And you asked about landscape generally. We have two very great landscape architects on the North Landing and the South Landing, and another third one joining this bridge team, and we're going to look as part of the design process to ensure that they're integrating a comprehensive idea for landscape throughout all of the projects. I hope that answers all your questions.
The last one is just the opportunity to touch the water.
Touch, like physically touch?
Physically touch.
Put your finger in there.
At this moment, I mean, the team can speak to it, but at this moment, no, but we look forward to your comments.
I think there's an opportunity to kind of walk below the bridge and so.
Oh, yes,
Right,
yes.
so from that pathway there,
On the South Landing.
yeah, and we're still figuring out the scope of that particular connection, but it is kind of part of the project.
So the bridge line's very high on the south side, purposefully, so that we can get that walk underneath the bridge.
Okay. All right, let's go around here and then I'll go online. So bear with me here. Pat, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I had a question about the founding or the foundation or the abutments of the founding of the arch and of the platform. I mean, the model is beautiful and seamless. I don't seem to see any foundations. Have you done, is it as invisible as it looks like and buried below grade, or just have you had a chance to look at whatever? Yeah, where are they? And how big?
Can you hear that okay?
we can. It looks like Elliot wants to go next.
I can
Go.
answer this one because we don't have Arap in the room. We were initially looking at two options for the foundations. One was a tied art solution, and that gave us the smallest sort of foundation design possible because it takes all the thrusting forces out of the bridge. But the one we've gone for, and I think is our preference, is to try and get rid of the tie because it's a point of failure. So the foundations get slightly larger. They are hidden underground. So what we've been looking at on the north abutment, there is the foundation itself kind of straddles the wet dock wall. So half of it effectively sticks into the water area, which would be then built up land, and the other half would be underneath the design of the WEP. And then to the south, it would be completely concealed within the landscape design, and that's what we're just starting to get to grips with Chris, and how we actually sort of take advantage of, or the opportunities that we could potentially suggest to the designers of the Promontory Park North to the south.
That's great, thanks.
Anna Marie?
Thank you for a really informative and thoughtful presentation and a beautiful result to contemplate. I have maybe a very niche question for you. Well, first is the handrails that you mentioned, the wind perforated screens. Could you just say what those materials might be, or at least confirm they're not glass, right?
Oh, they're perforated stainless steel.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. And then I wonder if you've undertaken any studies about the night lighting. This is a really amazing area, as you will know, particularly during migration season for birds and bats that will use these corridors. And I think it's fair to say these incredible parks will be attracting some of the wildlife that we've lost from the ravine system and estuary to this very fertile, beautiful area. So it seems to me that that might be an interesting thing to know about. And the night lighting is, while it's very beautiful, may also potentially need some adjustment. So I wonder if you can elaborate that.
And the general design of the lighting is something that we're yet to sort of grapple with. I mean, we are very much aware of dark sky strategies and need to be very sensitive towards that. What we want to do is make sure that we sort of encapsulate the indigenous narrative within the design of the balustrades and perhaps the flooring, either with or without the lighting solution. So we want to be sensitive, but we're yet to sort of get to grips with that level of detailing, but we're aware of the issue.
Oh, great. On the same note, then, maybe as part of the Indigenous strategy, although it would also be just a responsible building strategy for sustainability, it may be something, have you considered at all the movement along this corridor, or will you consider the movement of some of the species at risk that we have, particularly in aerial insectivores like swallows, that have just been, for example, displaced from another part of the lake in rather significant numbers? And this bridge is a very attractive structure for some of those creatures. So I wonder if that's also maybe part of the consideration. Again, I don't know whether you would place it with Indigenous relations or not, but certainly the consideration around sustainability.
I think that the integration of areas for birds to rest and roost might well be tackled as part of our landscape strategy as well. But to be honest with you, we haven't looked at encouraging, if you like, bird life to inhabit the bridge.
No, we're very much, beyond the sort of, we had our first Indigenous talking circle last 3 weeks ago now. And there was a lot of conversations about this and how we can sort of encourage biodiversity. So we're yet to get there of how we're sort of contributing in that sort of respect, whether it be birds or encouragement of fish at the base of the bridge design. But it's hopefully to come.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, Fatty?
Just a couple of follow-up questions. Thank you for the presentation. So just to be clear, the steps on the north side, they'll have no access. No, there's no way for anyone to get to put feet in the water or touch it on the north, there'll be like a handrail or it's too high up? Or is this purely conceptual?
The steps that you see on the images were from the competition stage, where we were looking to step the abutment down to the water's edge and integrate planting and seating into it. It's sort of developed now away from that, but I'm not saying we couldn't have a look at that as we continue to develop those abutment designs. I mean, I share the notion that trying to get down to the water would be really nice. Definitely, it's why we had it as part of the original concept. I guess we have to be mindful now of the reality of designing the structure efficiently, economically, and with sort of minimal protrusion into the water as another constraint. But I mean, we can certainly take that away and talk to our immediate client about obviously all of these points you've raised and see what we can navigate through.
Since the competition, we have begun kind of discussions with Ports Toronto as well about what they need, what our kind of constraints are, as well as kind of taking up much more detailed look at hydraulic modeling and the impact that any protrusion in the Keating channel would have kind of upstream. So it's kind of, these things are all kind of coming into play now, and they'll kind of really be dug into during DD.
And then for the perforation in the noses, do they require any specific maintenance? The perforation in the ground, that kind of mesh walkways that are hovering, is there?
No, they don't. It's a wedge wire. Well, the current proposal is it's a wedge wire product, very robust.
So
It's
they're not
stainless steel, so it doesn't need very much upkeep at all.
You can see an example of it in the Eaton Center Bridge, just on the other side.
on either side.
Right, and it's been there since it's been opened, and obviously it's not being walked on, so it's slightly different condition, but at the same time, you
And
can kind
then,
of get a sense of what that's gonna look like.
awesome. And then there's just one last very question. It's probably from the renders and it's still work in progress. But there's the edge where the bridge meets on the south side of the site. There's a moment in which the bridge meets a kind of planting edge, and then that arrives onto a paved path. Is there a strategy from the landscape team that's thinking more about that, where the planting in the south side ends and where the physical infrastructure of the bridge begins? Or is this still very much a work in progress? Is there any kind of technical requirements that are needed to make sure that the plants don't die, that there's a salt, like maintenance, like that very thin edge that's in the rendering is there kind of like a tow rail that will go in, or is there any specific things that need where planting begins and infrastructure starts, or paving?
I mean, that is definitely, it is something we're conscious of. We've dealt with that in lots of other projects. It's definitely a design development phase kind of discussion. But yeah, I mean, we're quite conscious of making sure that the as yet undesigned Promontory Park North connection is both flows seamlessly from a pedestrian and bicycle standpoint, but also that there are ways to easily get into the landscape from that point. And that's what we've been looking at right now is how people can get down closer to the water. There's a path that runs under the bridge, as was noted, and we're looking at seating areas down there that could provide that kind of connection that is no longer part of the north side connection.
Thank you.
There's also kind of a scope, a discussion here too, where we kind of figure out we have the Promontory Park landscape as a project, and then we have kind of our interim condition as another project, and then so it's just lots of opportunities for that integration to happen. So there's the interim connection.
Let's keep going. I'm mindful of time. Gina.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. I just had one question. You mentioned that you had moved from a 6 meter to 5 meter width for the bridge. Could you talk a little bit about what was the thinking behind that width and holding it uniform? I'm just curious what your precedent or your guidelines were there.
Again, I'll let Elliot field that one. It's a detailed question that he can answer.
I think this one's a little bit more frank. It's more about the cost, and very conscious of trying to drive the costs down for the bridge itself, and especially when we were increasing the height in terms of the additional clearance, means we wanted to make sure we either maintained or squeezed the area slightly of the bridge. So we looked to reduce it, and we were benchmarking against a lot of generally European projects and UK projects that shared not a split pedestrian cycle, but a shared bridge. So the surface is not split. In terms of, we've seen bridges that go down to 3 meters, and what we found generally is when the bridge gets narrower, people slow down. And so we thought going from 6 to 5 in the bridge design was a marginal sort of reduction in its overall width. And the bridge does expand towards the noses, so it goes from 5 meters to 8 meters, but it always maintains that minimum 5 meter width at its, what would say, the pinch points of the bridge.
Thank you.
Okay. Kevin?
Thanks. It's pretty compelling design. Finding it. I'm looking at the competition model here, and you mentioned the ties that would reduce the thrust on the abutments. And my comments generally revolve around, for example, in this case, embodied carbon, how we can reduce that to the greatest extent possible while maintaining a pretty amazing structure. Your presentation outlined, I think, a pretty rigorous analysis of, spanning the channel, bringing the abutments into the channel itself. And I'm just thinking, from overall bridge design, every meter we extend that span, we have a sort of a non-linear increase in the amount of material that we need to span that. I'm just wondering, did you do a life cycle assessment looking at the embodied carbon of having embutments to reduce the midspan against sort of a lighter overall arching structure? Is there an advantage on a overall embodied carbon perspective going this longer, lighter structure versus say reducing that span with a couple of abutments moved into the channel?
I think that generally the strategy that we've adopted since day one has been to try and reduce the overall steel tonnage and therefore the overall embodied carbon for the project. And it was the instigator to going from a straight arch to one that we're calling the anti-funicular arch. And that as a structure, it takes out almost all the torsional rotation, so it's all in compression, so it's extremely efficient. And what we were looking at, and we've still got it in our back pocket, is the tie at the bottom to try and take out any thrusting forces within the bridge geometry itself, which would therefore reduce the concrete tonnage again and the steel tonnage because it's working less hard, and then the embodied carbon goes down. But we're slightly hesitant because we haven't worked through the details on a tied arch because it's technically a point of failure, and we're just trying to sort of get to grips with what that potential risk is. So to be super efficient in our design, we would look to introduce the tie. And I think we're really conscious about the length of the deck, and we want to keep that as minimal as possible because one, it gets the costs up, and two, it also increases your embodied carbon. And I think that's why we're sort of not struggling, but we've got a challenging interface with the North Water's Edge Promenade, where we are seeking to find the most efficient solution there, so we can make sure that the bridge is as efficient as we can possibly get it.
Absolutely, and I can understand that. I would call that sort of productive friction. It's a very dynamic, kind of amazing statement. I guess what I'm wondering is that you could take the same amount of concrete that the abutments have now, maybe even less than them, move them into the channel and have a much shorter spanning structure that still might have this very dynamic arch. I'm just wondering, has that analysis been performed? anything we can do to reduce the amount of concrete in the project, you know, is you know, very, very important. So that's what I'm sort of asking, you know.
Dave, and I think you've touched on the issue of building within the channel itself as potential concern to others outside of our sphere of influence, shall we say. So there is a concern there. There's clearly we're finding quite substantial cost penalties to be building into the water. So we might find we've reduced the tonnage by doing as you say, but it might bring additional costs to the project. You know, not insubstantial additional costs. There's also, you know, as Elliot said, I think there's this whole issue of narrowing the channel further, and you know, with the tie does become a point of failure that you need to protect if that's a point of failure. And you know, to make it not a point of failure, you're probably throwing more steel at the arch again. So there's, yeah, I think these are great questions, and we can certainly circle back within the team.
Yeah, not to belabor it, I guess what I'm asking is, has an LCA been performed, and perhaps it hasn't, and I would encourage the team to look at overall embodied carbon as we're trying to kind of, you know, construct this incredible dynamic structure, so. Yeah.
Okay, let's, I'm mindful of time. Let's leave it at that. I'm gonna go, Pina, Betsy, and Jana. Pina, you wanna go next? Any questions?
Yes, sure. Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. I think my colleagues have asked a number of questions I had. I might only add a question about the north connection as a tangential. I really appreciated those basic diagrams and the general difference between them. I do have, I mean, this may be more in the comments, but I do think that there is a general aversion to actually building into the channel more. And what you likely have already been doing is really combining efforts to the remedial work that will be happening inevitably on the north side at Quayside with the new seawall and the sort of regeneration of that edge. And I understand from your presentation that you're actually trying to keep the abutment incorporated within that already sort of existing built space. In that regard, like,
okay, can you just get to what the question is, Pina?
Yeah, the question is, have you studied the different options at that north connection with respect to keeping within the existing seawall on the north side? For example, the tangential that really moves out, is there a way to connect it without having the abutment come into the water, into the channel?
That is definitely one of the options we're exploring, to be completely away from any sort of engagement with the water.
All right, thank you.
Right, and it's not exclusive.
It's not. I mean, we're weighing up. Do we, you know, if you put it on the land, for example, it goes to the point of making the bridge even longer, because you've got to increase the span. So it
reduces the width of the promenade as well by the width of the bridge by 5 meters or 6 meters.
Yeah, so it's the barrier as well that we're not rejecting the option of landing on the promenade at all, but we really need to try and make the best agree what the best solution is.
But that's, I mean, that's great. I think that the tangential connection is a preferred one, maybe as long as it doesn't require structure into the channel. My second question is just if with respect to the family of bridges, do you have a drawing or like just, I think even just a complete section of the bridge relative to the Cherry Street bridges, or you know, what generally it could be in contrast to them, but it would be lovely to see just what the family looks like.
I think that section that I showed had the Cherry Street in the background.
Yeah,
no,
I think you're right.
Yeah, but I guess it's sort of in the distance. I just was wondering, in scale and experience, you know, this is a longer bridge, but.
Well, look, it's not an exact.
we can do the drawing that shows the sort of what the relationships are. I mean, there is something quite conic about the Cherry Street Bridge, or parabolic with the top of it, and it's very much part of the geometry that we've encapsulated into the arch. If you look in true elevation, if you're on the axis of the bridge, you have a conic or a parabolic shape to the arch. It is taller because we've got to sort of span a little bit further and find the most efficient shape possible.
Okay, so let's
But
just,
yeah, there is a relationship we're trying to.
Yeah, there is.
and if you could provide such a drawing, that would be helpful. So, Jana.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for a fantastic presentation. I think my colleagues have asked most of the questions. I just have one, which is, have you spent any time looking at the underside of the bridge yet, and the experience for people who are moving at that lower elevation, and any ideas about its, how it's contoured? Is there lighting? Is maybe that's a place for habitat? I just think it's a really fantastic opportunity, and at night, the reflections on the water are just going to amplify that zone from the surface of the water to the underside of the bridge.
Yeah. Well, I'll start. Maybe I'll start the response, Elliot. You finish it, as it were. So certainly the competition stage.
Please say, keep it brief. We're running out of time. We haven't even got the comment.
We completely accept that the soffit of the bridge is going to be very important to the success of the bridge. We'd love it to have a presence to it, and to be able to reflect the water, it's not forgotten. Don't worry about it. It's definitely in our forefront of our mind, and we're studying lots of options for what that soffit looks like.
Betsy.
No questions, might have been covered already.
Oh my God. Unbelievable. I just have one simple question. Have you ever thought about graffiti? Because last time I walked over the Cherry Street bridges, there's graffiti all over one side of it. And I've reported that several times. I don't know if it's been corrected, but it really upsets me.
That's a difficult one to mitigate. It's very much
be aware of
open.
Be aware
of.
Okay.
We are.
Comments, and we are tight. We're at 3 o'clock. We're supposed to go on to the next item by 3:15. So try and keep them brief. Just go around.
I think it's set up to be a great process, and I can't wait to see the next stages.
Beautiful. Pat.
Yes, I agree with that. It was a very good presentation, and I'm looking forward to schematic design.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Sorry, one more thing. Love that. Yes. Really look forward to the integration of the landscape elements, and in particular the materials, as much of the metaphor as relating to habitat, biodiversity, and all that. Please explore the opportunities to touch the water, particularly under the bridge, the experience of the design under the deck, not just for humans, but that ability to touch and connect with the water. Also for other species, I really do. Please don't shy away from the species at risk in this area, particularly swallows. They eat bugs, they need the bottom of the bridge, they won't hurt your bridge.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's really great to see that equinox and solstice narrative manifest in a physical way, and not just kind of metaphor, motif, label, but this is really what design competitions allow for. So it's really great to see this kind of physical manifestation of culture and critical infrastructure come together. So just want to give everybody a quick thumbs up about that and about the process. And really excited about the integration of seating as much as possible. On these noses, they'll be very popular. And if at all possible, on the north and south landing as steps, and as, even if it's kind of informal, like even if the grade of these steps is not perfect, like if it's not to the code of what is needed for a seating step, I think it'll be really great to even just break it as needed to make that possible. And last but not least, that fine line of the edge of where planting begins and then the heavy foot traffic starts has to be really considered. The last thing you want is eroded slopes with trampled on planting and all kinds of just dead grass vegetation with dirt all over, because there'll be a lot of going through. So that little fine line is something that should be considered. Other than that, I think it's very exciting. And congratulations to the team.
Great. Gina?
Yeah, so I would say yes to the underside design being so critical, yes to the habitat and any in-water construction, such an opportunity. And my biggest comment is really that I wonder about the width being uniform of the walkway, and 5 meters, given that it's not a multi-use heavy bicycled bridge. If you could tighten that, and if you could tighten that, especially at the noses, to gain more of that seating space. I just think that's going to be where people will want to be. And I think the tighter the bridge walkway gets, the slower people will move, as you said, but also people don't linger there. And they're really going to want to come down to that seating. So, even if it gets to 3.5 meters, that would still feel comfortable. I think 5 might feel overscaled. So just an encouragement there to go tighter.
Yeah. And Kevin?
I'm really excited to see the innovation of the structure, the light structure, the ingenuity. What I would like to encourage you to do right from the outset right now is start sourcing electric arc steel, low carbon steel, start talking to the suppliers about that, start talking to the concrete manufacturers about advanced mixes of low carbon concrete. And, if you're going to specify wood for the deck or related components, that be certified wood.
Okay, back to online. Peanut, comment?
Yes, I just want to say congratulations. Such an exciting project. I'm especially excited to see landscape take a driving seat on the project, and also excited about the kind of tangibles or experiential aspects like wind we didn't really talk about, and you might not be there yet. But just that experience and how every aspect dovetails into the next. So great to see.
Great. Okay, Jana?
Thanks. I agree with my colleagues, and I won't belabor the point except to say I'm sorry I can't see the model in real life. I'm sure it would explain a lot. I just have one comment, which is the area of the steps and the nosing. I think you've done an incredible job finessing the barrier-free with respect to mobility challenges. But I have a concern about people with visual challenges. In my experience, those steps and the perforated floor for people with visual challenges can be very disorienting. And I think those two places are going to be really jam-packed with people all the time. And I feel like those other areas of accessibility should be scrubbed, not just the mobility one, to make sure everybody can enjoy it equally.
Great. Betsy?
Thank you. A great presentation. I'm really excited about this new connection because there aren't that many ways to get across onto this new island. And I think this is going to be a very heavily trafficked bridge. My question, kind of opposite of Gina's, was, is it wide enough? I trust Gina and her comments relative to how you control flow in spaces like this, so I will defer to her. I think you're going to get a lot of people on bikes not getting off their bikes, and what we want to avoid are those dreadful City of Toronto signs that say, please dismount and walk your bike across this bridge. So my biggest pet peeve about the bridges that have been already constructed in the Portlands is the integration of the light poles that traffic put in, the any signage. They come uncomfortably close to the bridge kind of formally, and they just, that integration is really wasn't really thought through. So if I'm sure your team is you have team members here in Toronto. I don't know if this is going to be on Chris's plate, but how do you coordinate these lighting requirements that you're going to have from the city, maybe from traffic, in a way that is seamless onto the bridge? I mean, we asked this probably every single time the other bridges came to panel, and it kind of wasn't done. My lighting concern, to add to the list of other lighting concerns, is safety at night, particularly for women and kids, and anyone who may not feel safe walking through a quiet part of the city, to have lighting that is integrated to be on people's faces so that they have kind of light around them. I love all of your lighting strategies, lighting up the arc. The constellations are fantastic. And Nina Marie's concerns relative to wildlife have to be addressed as well. So those are my primary two. My last one is that you picked probably two of the best sculptural precedents you could have shown between the Gabo and the Jungian piece. They're so delicate, and then they had this beautiful massing. Can your bridge come to that level of balance between mass, negative space, delicacy of line, maybe using any secondary elements from the handrail composition to kind of reinforce that? Because the connection I'm seeing now is just the kind of linear elements connecting the line to the deck. And I think that if you could push that really to its limit of thinness and lightness weighted by this other kind of massing, you're really going to be able to get somewhere. So I very much look forward to the next review. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to try and do a very brief summary of this. Obviously, we're very enthusiastic and supportive of all the work that you've done. It's beautiful, it's stunning, it's inspiring. All those kinds of adjectives are obvious. I think the comments for further study are as follows. The importance of the role of integration of landscape and the coordination with promontory park designs. Obviously, that's yet to come, but it's got to be a seamless integration. And I'm glad everybody seems to be talking to everybody about that. That's going to be really, really critical. Opportunities to touch the water has been mentioned several times. I think that's important to try and accomplish. Opportunities, whether on the north side, the south side, under the bridge, various areas need to be thoroughly explored, because I think people will want to get down there. And especially kids, they'll want to go underneath in that path to look under and see what it looks like and feels like underneath. Which brings me to night lighting and safety issues. I think you've heard comments on that. That's important. That bridge is going to be absolutely like a jewel at night across the Keating Channel, and it'll attract a lot of people and a lot of attention. And whether different colors of lights are all, pure white lights, who knows? But lighting is going to be a really important consideration. Integration with landscape on the south side, in particular, I've heard some comments about how it's critical to make sure that there's a delineation, fine line treatment of where the planting begins and where the bridge ends. You want to avoid a lot of people destroying a landscape that will be provided there. Couple of requests, if possible, the drawing of this bridge with the Cherry Street Bridge behind it in much greater detail, so we can see the relationship of the two, because it's obviously there. The width of the bridge, a few comments. Just keep studying it. Perhaps a little narrower in some spots, a little wider in other spots. No precise direction, but some observation that a tighter bridge with the on the walkway to be considered, and obviously cost considerations are key all the way through this. So I think that'll probably guide it. Comment made about the equinox analogy, which I loved. I think it's fantastic. It'll be a teaching experience for young people, for old people, for everyone, just in terms of the 4 seasons of the year and how it relates to the alignment of this bridge is terrific. Integration of seating, essential. People are going to love to just get out there and sit and watch and just look, away for canoes to go underneath and all those kinds of activities. So really, really critical. Comments made about the materials, the embodied carbon issue with respect to steel and concrete. Comment made about the visually challenged people. It should be accessible and friendly and not in any way destructive or to discourage them. And I guess a final area about, I agree. I think somebody said it could be, I know it's not meant for bicycles, but people will ride across there, and there could be a lot of conflicts with pedestrians and bicycles. And, you know, it's the last thing you want to see. So it just needs to have a strategy of how you're going to deal with that, whether you get off the bike and you have to walk it, but people will ignore that, of course. So all those things are important to consider. So, oh yeah, and the last comment, the question I asked about graffiti, I don't have the answer either, but it just breaks my heart when I went across the Cherry Street Bridge and saw these ridiculous, you know, graffiti on the arches. So give that some consideration. And other than that, great, love it. Thank you for a great presentation, all the great work, and we look forward to it coming back. So thanks again.
Thank you.
12 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time and comments.
3 minutes to go to the water.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right, can everyone hear me?
Yeah, don't be shy.
Yes, we
So-
can hear you.
So the next item on our agenda is Block 13 as part of the West Don lands for schematic design. Please note that there will be a vote after the panel discussion. My name is Derek Way, and I'm the development manager here at Waterfront Toronto. I'll be giving a brief introduction for this project, and then I'll pass it on to the Green Kilmer team to introduce their team and share their presentation. To give everyone some background on this site, so Block 13 was part of the 2011 Pan Am Athletes Village RFP that was completed with IO. Dream and Kilmer were the successful winners of that bid, and it included Block 13 along with Blocks 12 and 16. Block 13 is one of the last remaining blocks to be developed and is located directly west of the Courtdown Commons Park. Waterfront Toronto and Dream and Kilmer entered into a development agreement in 2011. And as a condition of that DA, they're obligated to build Deletes Gold. It's currently TGSV 3 right now. Dream and Kilmer will share some of the design specifics in their presentation, but at a high level, some of the GFA impacts include an increase of the residential square footage from 602,000 to 688,000, increasing the number of units by 200 and bringing the total to just over 1,000. The commercial GFA has also increased from 8,200 to now 10,660. Car parking ratios have decreased from 0.24 to 0.16, bringing the number of spots down from 214 to 169. And total parking or bike parking on site is 1,084. In March of 2022, Dream and Kilmer completed their pre-application consultation, and later in April came here for their DRP issues ID, and also submitted their first rezoning and SPA submission. They'll share more about their future milestone and timelines in their presentation. This is a satellite view just of the area. As you can see, Front Street is just to the north, Tannery is to the west, Mills to the south, and Bayview is just east. This is the 2006 precinct block plan. This is an aerial of the West Don lands. As you can see, most of the development projects in that area are either fully complete or currently in construction. This image also shows the correlating number of stories for each particular project. Again, this is just from Google, so it's not entirely up to date. This is the Block 13 precinct plan massing. Some of the design principles that were originally contemplated as a part of this design include retail at grade, inclusion of an exterior courtyard space, and a curvature facade design. Here is just some street level perspectives from Block 13. This is looking southwest towards downtown along Mill Street. This is looking southeast along Tannery. This is northeast. And lastly, this is looking northwest towards the Courtdown Commons Park. Here's a zoning map from 2010. Just west of Block 13 is Block 12. This is the design of that particular building. This is the east elevation of Block 12. As you just noting that on the ground floor of Block 12, facing Block 13, are townhouses at grade. And here's another image of Block 12. The top is a visual of the of Cannery Road and some of the landscaping, and the bottom is a visual again showing those townhomes at grade. I'll now pass it on to Leon to speak more of the ERP process.
Yeah. Thanks, Derek. So this project application, that was stage 1 review, so no vote was taken. Today, they've returned for schematic design review. We will take a vote and we will see this project one more time later at detailed design. Next slide, please. And just to quickly refresh, is the design that was shown at that stage. You'll note in the presentation, of course, the massing has changed, design has changed. I'll quickly recap the consensus comments from us. I'm just highlighting the key. Generally, consider the memory of the site, the inspiration for the design, the indigenous community, and of shadow studies throughout the day at schematic design. Show the existing contacts and buildings and drawings, including adjacent buildings in the section and elevation drawings. I'm breaking up. I'm sorry. I'll try to just get through this. If you can't hear me, then I can move ahead. You can refer to these slides. How is the audio?
Yeah, it's okay now, but you were breaking up. So yeah, we can see it. So just keep going.
Sure. Okay. Why don't we just move forward, Derek, to the next slide. In terms of building design, there was support for a ground floor program that would provide critical mass along Front Street. Consider more activation along the Bayview Avenue frontage, further develop the Tannery Street elevation, and also consider how this building will relate to the future school on Block 9, which is on the south side of Mill Street. And also on the building exterior, consider simplifying the ensemble of materiality, colors, motifs, and the different treatment between the tower and mid-rise volumes. Next slide, please. On landscape, retain the existing street trees instead of replanting as much as possible. Ensure the landscaping for the at-grade units is well designed, and it will serve as a threshold between public and private. Maximize sunlight into the courtyard. On sustainability, consider the use of thermally broken balconies. Maximize all efforts to reduce embodied carbon. Next slide. And finally, we just want to highlight a few areas for the panel to consider today. Does the revised massing respond to panel comments and relate well with the built form and public realm on all different sides, all the key frontages? Is there support for the revised tower location and also the revised facade design concept and cladding strategy? Also, is there a support on ground floor programs along the key frontages? And does the panel support streetscape and landscape design concepts being presented today? And finally, do the proposed sustainability strategies meet our objectives? Are there other strategies that the team can consider at this point of the design? And with that, I will pass it over to the design team. Thank you.
Thanks, I believe, Gregory, are you going to kick it off?
Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Is it clear? Okay,
Yep.
Great. Okay, so Stephen, you want to say a few words or I should just jump in?
Please jump in.
Okay, so I'm going to try and share my screen, everyone. I'm old and I get bumps with technology, so I'm going to do my best. Here we go. Have Nicolette, in case I can share. There we go. There we go. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Mazel tov. Okay, here we go. All right, so that's great. Okay, so here, Okay, I'm going to go very quickly because I know I heard that everyone had this presentation ahead of time, and please stop me at any time and if you have any questions. And at the very end, we're happy to come back and obviously answer whatever questions you want. We have a full contingent of people here to answer your questions, and I will do a quick presentation, and then we'll have a landscape presentation. Then we're going to do some shadows. And from Bosefield, then the landscape, and then the very end will be sustainability. The meeting agenda. We're going to talk about what we heard over the past 2 years, and then we're going to show you some massing explorations and the new design. We've been at this for a long time. We started this 4 years ago, and we've been going through a number of meetings over the last 2 years with yourselves, with the city, with Waterfront Toronto, with neighborhood people. And what you'll see here today is really the result of the input of a myriad of influences, which have changed both the texture and scale of the urban planning, but also the tectonics and the potential and what way in which we'll be exploring the expression of the building as well. The first ERP, which was presented by planning just now, was very different than what you'll see today. The application in terms of the ZBA number 1 was also very different. What we heard was long, and so we got lots of comments, and the majority of the comments stemmed around 2 things. One, about getting to fit into the sort of urban design context and not be distinct and unique, but really be contextual. A real desire for the building to be contextual and part of the Canary District and fit into its neighboring buildings with adjacencies that are matching very much the scale of the buildings across the street. The other thing we heard was to tone it down a bit and to try and create a simpler architectural expression, which was also more in keeping with the neighborhood itself. And so those are what we've been working really hard to do today. And this is the first step in the rezoning. Obviously, much more development will be done as we move forward into the SPA. Okay, so here's a very rough sort of progression from the beginning to the end of where we are. And a lot of it has to do with the adjustment of heights of towers, the orientation of different elements, street walls coming up and down. And I'm going to take you through a more detailed sort of explanation of a few of them, just to give you a taste for it. One of the very first ones has to do with Bayview and the relationship with Block 4 and how the building faces the park. The big concern here was trying to find something which embraced the park and really made a street wall which was consistent with Block 4, but also allowed it to feel like a contained sort of facade in relationship to the public space. So we've matched Block 4, both in scale and even the curving of the facade, which is a very specific request. The other element had to do with sort of what I'll call the gate posts at the end of Front Street as it meets the park. The Kurabawa Payne McKenna Bloomberg building has a vertical element, I think around 16 stories, and ours matches 16 stories across. The idea is to really create this entry gateway into the park. The other relationship had to do with both Mill Street and Tannery Street and having a 6-story podium which related to the future school, but also across to the more intimate scale across the way over on Tannery with townhouses facing the other townhouses, which makes a lot of sense. And so here you see a revised massing with the tower now running parallel along Mill Street, broken down into 2 masses in order to create this, a more intimate scale and smaller scale for the tower. We have a 12-story street wall, which is on Bayview, which frames Block 4 as we discussed, the 16 stories at the corner of Front Street, the 6 stories on Mill Street and Tannery, and a 12-story element which transitions on Front Street as you come down towards the park. So what you see here is sort of the new story in terms of the larger picture of the neighborhood. You can see how our podium building now fits into the other podium building in Block 4, and our larger tower now is consistent with Block 20 and the Foundry Tower, which frame it on either side. So we're in the middle. What we've tried to do, though, is to try and break the scale of the building down vertically into 2 elements and shift them slightly so that the floor plate doesn't look so large and that it somehow ties into the tectonic of the story as a whole. So what you see here are some very rough massing diagrams which show that the gateway element along Front Street facing the park. Looking down Tannery Street, you can see the 6-story street wall and the element of the tower being broken into 2 pieces. And in terms of design development, we had a very intricate story about the canary and wings and colors and textures, which was felt to be too busy for this neighborhood. And so we've broken it down into 2 very distinct elements. And we're going to call them, for the purposes of this presentation, Tectonic A and Tectonic B. Tectonic A is now a darker charcoal color brick for the moment. And it's really about the buildings that hit the ground. They're about the street walls and the elements that sort of emerge from the ground to create a distinct sort of partie, which frames then other elements, which we're going to call Tectonic B, which sit on top of the podium. And so we really have 2 we have a podium building, which emerges as 2 towers, and we have 2 street wall buildings, which sit on top of the podiums, and the second part of the tower, which matches the other tectonic expression, which is a lighter gray silver brick, which is more vertical. So in terms of townhouse expressions along Bayview and other places, we have a very simple, elegant, modernist townhouse expression, each with their own little front yards and their own gardens and their own planters, which frame an outdoor space and a little tree, and a door which frames and comes in. As you come around Bayview on towards Front Street, it transitions into retail and entrances for the residential buildings, and the same tectonic continues. So you can see it becoming retail along Front Street, and the idea is restaurants and other things will spill out onto the public realm there, again with a very ability for a whole bunch of different retailers with a smaller scale retailers than we originally envisioned before, so you can have a bunch of different restaurants and rather than one larger restaurant. So each will have its ability for own signage and its own little areas for spilling out for seating. And if you look now facing the park, you can see the street wall building, the 12 stories that transitions up to the 16 stories down at the corner there and how it faces the park. There's an opportunity you can see on the left in the corner there for a possible daycare, which could be along Tannery Street, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more as we go. And as you come down Tannery and Mill Street and you look towards Tannery, sorry, getting them all mixed up, the streets, I'm all dyslexic. The townhouses continue and turn around the corner along Tannery, and they face the other townhouses across the way with Block 12. I got to get the numbers straight, Block 12. Here you can see the partie very clearly of the 2 different tectonics. You have the darker brick tectonic, which wraps around and goes up and becomes one element in the tower, and the lighter brick tectonic, which is very minimalist, which sits on top of it and beside it. Here's facing the park. You can see what we hope you think is a very elegant, simple partie of one L-shaped piece, which sort of defines the entrance to the park and also the park podium, and then the more continuous horizontal bands of balconies above. Here's a view down Front Street, so you can see very clearly how the 12-story podium in the back of behind our 16-story corner starts to transition to the other 12-story buildings along the way. And our tower gets broken away and shifted into 2 elements in the distance, hoping that it reads very thin and elegant. Here's a little higher up, if you're a bird. Here's a view looking north at the northeast corner of Front Street, looking down Tannery, with a smaller little element that transitions to the 12-story street wall down the way. And you can now see the 2 stories of the tower very clearly, the 2 elements of the tower very clearly, and how they are distinct and break the scale down of the massing. Here's an aerial view as the bird flies, looking down into the courtyard, which is now elevated, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, and how it frames the park. Again, looking down Front Street, you see the sort of larger axial relationship, and the tall foundry building, the very large building on the right, is framing our tower on the left. Some of the drawings, the GFA, as we said, has been increased to almost 700,000 square feet, and the tower height is at 43, and the street wall's 12 stories, and 6 stories along Tannery and Mill Street. One of the big changes has to do with above-grade parking. We have minimized the amount of parking within the podium, and so we have continuous retail along Front Street. We have a possible daycare, and townhouses on the rest of the ground plane. And in the middle, we've buried 3 levels of parking, which actually work really well to bring the courtyard up and have fewer units facing the internal courtyard. If you remember before, we had a much higher street wall building and much wider, and it had units that got very little light. And this way we have much more successful units in terms of only 3 levels of units on one side, and then at the most on the other side facing Bayview, there's not as many, it gets direct sunlight coming from the south. This we have P1 at the below grade has all of our bicycle stalls, and as we come up to grade, you can see a street, your ground level plan with the Tannery Road over here with the townhouses in block 12. Mill Street has the potential to have a daycare. The purple are townhouses facing Bayview and Tannery, and we have CRUs, smaller CRUs now, which march along Front Street and face onto Bayview on the corner. And all of the parking is buried internally with the entrance to the parkade mirroring the entrance across the way along Tannery Street. As you emerge up, you get your second level of your double height daycare. You get your townhouses in 2 levels, another level of parking. And then we have a single loaded corridor which wraps around the final level of parking with people who have incredible access into their units from their parking. And as you come up, we get the podium, which has the outdoor space, which is now private, which accesses directly amenity spaces which face in from the cores into the central courtyard, and some wonderful little 1-bedrooms which ring around the internal courtyard. As it emerges on a level 7, you get the street wall, which turns from Front Street onto Bayview, and the tower starts to emerge, and we have outdoor spaces which are at level 7 with amenity in the tower at that level. As you get higher up, we start to get more units, and you get to level 13, you get to the amenity space at the top, near the top of the building on the corner of Front and Bayview, and you have, again, very large outdoor amenity spaces, which also have lots of natural light as well. As we merge up, the tower shifts into 2 elements and then eventually separates into one smaller, very tiny tower for the final floors. I'm now going to pass over the shadow studies to Bosefield, and I'll let them talk about all the efforts we've gone to minimize the shadowing on the park.
Thanks, Gregory. And I'm just going to do a quick sound check. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yeah,
okay,
we're
perfect.
fine.
Excellent.
Just say next when you want to go to the next slide.
Will do. So just quickly, what we've done is we prepared and included in the presentation shadow studies focus on Courtown Common, both in March 21st and June 21st. We've chosen those times and not included September 21st, given the similarity between March and September, but we have prepared those and we're happy to answer questions related to September as well. What's included here is sort of 4 different shadows. One is the as of right, or the existing shadows, which are in gray. In yellow is the incremental shadow from the proposed development. And there are 2 lines, purple and dark blue. The purple is the as of right shadow cast by an as of right development on the subject site as per the existing zoning. And the dark blue is the previous massing presented at the first Waterfront Design Review Panel meeting. As you can see here, at 218 is when the shadow begins to fall on Courtown Common. And in yellow, you can see that at the corner of the park, there is a little bit of shadow at 218. At 318, there is a bit more shadow resulting from the relocated and realigned tower. However, it's falling largely on heavily treed areas and unprogrammed areas at the kind of front of the park, closer to Bayview Avenue. At 418, the incremental shadow is cast on some of the more important elements in the park, like the splash pad. However, the majority of that shadow, as you can see, is within the shadow of the previous scheme. And the incremental shadow beyond that falls on largely unprogrammed areas in Moving the Park. If we go on to the next slide, we can look at 518. And we can see that at 518, the incremental shadow is largely off of the programmed areas of the park, with a little bit of impact on the kind of the dog run and sports field areas to the south of the park. But the majority of the shadow on the more light sensitive areas in the center of the park is cast by an as of right building as well. And then by 618, the shadow is largely off the park, with only a sliver of incremental shadow on the park itself. If we go on to the next slide and look at June 21st, we can see that, again, same color scheme, showing the same separation of different shadow types. At 218, we can see that there is no shadow impact on the park whatsoever. At 318, a sliver of incremental shadow on the southeast corner of the park. And then at 418, some incremental shadow on the sports field. But if you go on to the next slide, we can see that at 518, there is no more incremental shadow on the park or the sports field, except for a small corner of that sports field at the bottom. And then by 618, there is some slivers of incremental shadow, but largely the shadow is off of the park by that time. And I'll turn over now to Terrence from NAC Design Strategies.
Okay, thank you. Can everyone hear me? Sound check. Not. Okay, great. Thanks, Gregory. So as Gregory mentioned that much of the landscape is doing the same thing in terms of fitting within the context of West Don Lands here. The streetscape along Bayview are being approach as a kind of replicating what's happened with the Pan Am Game building to the north along Bayview. Several existing trees we are preserving as many as possible along Front Street and Mill Street, and a few along Bayview as well. And some of you might know that we're the landscape architects for Block 12, and we are certainly also targeting to replicate and mirror what's happened with the at street level townhouse homes where patios are separated by a planted buffer, and that will be replicated on Block 13 side as well. Okay, next. Next. And so as Gregory mentioned, and this is hugely important, as you can imagine, for the landscape itself, is that now that the courtyard has been raised from ground floor to the fourth floor, we have much better, more solar access. So we're in the design point of view, we're also approaching it slightly differently. This is a very secluded private garden, and we are looking at a series of circular gardens and forums that basically create a series of smaller gardens that are fit within a larger garden. Next slide. And this, talking about how the approach is different, because before it was on the ground floor, we're taking into account of how people would enter and experience the site from the street level. But now this is very different. It's on the fourth floor, so it becomes a much more private, and we're seeing it as kind of an oasis, garden oasis for residents, and it's kind of a jewel in itself for residents in this, because there's only 2 floors of residents that's up the building that's surrounding it. Will have much better solar access. Okay, next slide. And up on top, there it is. Just kind of quickly going over the different amenity roofs. We are looking at on level 7, as Gregory mentioned, that there are amenity roofs on the facing the west and facing the south as well. The ones that are facing the south is a smaller area, so we're looking at more of a quiet, contemplative space. While on the west side it's a little bit more active. We have an outdoor gym. We're looking at possibly a dog run space. And as we move up to level 13, we're looking at a potential of a pool and other kind of outdoor amenity patio spaces, while on the northwest corner we're looking at the potential of having a community garden and urban farm type of landscape up there. Next. And here are a couple of sections just cutting through to confirm that, the Mill Street, there are existing trees, existing soil cells. That's shown in section A, and much of that will retain and preserve. And similar to, like I said, in section B, we're replicating the frontage from block 12 onto our side, block 13. Next. And then for sections through Front Street and Bayview, again, Front Street there are many existing trees, and we'll be continuing that and preserving that streetscape as with sections see through Bayview will be kind of replicating a similar section and form where the private terraces are buffered by a planter, and then we have additional plantings and separated eventually to the kind of the sidewalk system that's along Bayview Avenue. And that's essentially our landscape segment. Thanks. Or WDI.
Is somebody moving to the
Tonight?
next step?
Do we have Aylin here?
I don't think so.
Okay. They didn't show up. Okay, so here, can you guys see me?
Yep.
Can you see me? Okay, I'm here. I'm here with Sean Lapointe, my partner, who's been working with them on all the sustainability performance thresholds, and I'm just going to have him talk a few minutes about this. Okay.
Yeah, I'll try to fill in as best I can for Aylin Smith. Thank you. So as we're showing on this slide here, targeting the requirements of TGS version 3, tier 1. That's carrying forward from our previous application. Also looking at targeting LEED version 4 for new construction. Really important here, kind of our targets in terms of TEDI, GHGI, and UEI. Targets kind of generally kind of in line with the Toronto Green Standards. So TEDI of 70, GHGI of 20. Also not mentioned here, but something that was brought up kind of in the comments, embodied carbon, very important thing that we're going to be targeting as part of this project to reduce. Go on to the next slide. So some of the overall kind of big picture sustainability, energy, and climate strategies that we're targeting. Obviously high performance building enclosure, in-suite energy recovery ventilators for the suites, highly efficient water cooled chillers, high efficient water source heat pumps system with backup condensing boilers. Looking at induced draft cooling tower with variable speed drive fan coil. Overall, the building is currently at 50-50 window to wall ratio. We have 95% efficient condensing boilers for space heating and surface water heating. Electronically communicated motors for the ERV fans. VFD drivers in most hydronic pumps, and high efficiency LED lighting fixtures with occupancy controls. And then on the sustainability side, we're targeting LEED Gold. Currently targeting 63 points with a number of items that in order to hit those targets. Next one, in terms of LEED credit strategies, looking at bicycle parking, electric vehicles, storage and collection of recycling, light colored paving, vegetated roofs to reduce the heat island effect. Looking at careful selection of exterior lighting to reduce light pollution. All lighting will be LED. Looking at low emitting materials. And then further considerations, CO2 monitoring and densely occupied amenity spaces, enhanced refrigerant management, irrigation, reclaimed water submetering, reducing indoor water use by 40%. We're looking to conduct a whole building life cycle assessment and enhance systems in envelope commissioning. And I think that's the run through of the sustainability features, and hopefully I can answer any of the questions that you might have as well.
We're both here and we're ready for questions.
Excellent. And you're right on time. Thank you very much.
Did we do it? All right, excellent.
All right.
I like being on time. Anyway.
And also, if you could just listen up, Bridget.
Thank you for the presentation. So just so I understand, are you going to site plan? Like in terms of you had talked about the process, but what's your next step? Like, are you, in terms of you're moving forward through the municipal process?
You guys want to answer that?
Sure. So
Stephen, you want to take that one?
Sure. We have to go through, finish the site plan
I do what I do now.
So
So you have submitted your right? So you did one a while ago or recently, or? So that was like the earlier version that we saw was and then now you've rethought it and you're going for your second round of SPA with the city. Okay. And then, so in the way the heights are the heights, what you presented were the heights that you would like, and that will be part of your SPA submission. And that's been in consultation with the city, or what you think the market will bear, or is it kind of a bit of both?
Yes, we've been talking to the city over a period of a couple of years. So we've got some feedback from them as well.
And then in terms of the issue of retail, so what I'm seeing is some of the ground floor, you kind of go from Front Street to Bayview, and it looks like there's kind of retail, and then you shift to townhouses. Can you explain why that shift?
I think the retail is really to continue what we did on all the way down Front Street, right? Which is only on Front Street. We have very little retail that goes down Bayview, and it's very difficult to lease any space. And obviously, there's a lot of demand for residential, especially townhouses that face directly the park.
So it's really a kind of market-driven issue, and the further on the building on the other side, further north, there's no retail on that.
There's retail, but it does the same thing. It just goes around the corner.
Okay. And then in the sustainability, the issue of thermally broken balconies came up at the beginning, but maybe did I miss that in the way it was presented?
I don't think even at the beginning we talked about thermal breaks on all our projects. It's just a very difficult thing to achieve balconies, and we've limited the amount of balconies we have.
But the balconies you do have, so currently what we saw, are they thermally broken or not? No. Okay, thanks.
Just to add on to that, the next submission that you're making for SPA, does it include the above grade parking, or did the very first application include the above grade parking?
Oh, this is the first application, I think, had underground, and then we went through.
So now you're actually above grade. Okay, got it. Yeah, thank you.
Anna Marie?
Yeah, I think I understand from the plan, but just can I have your confirmation? First of all, sorry, thank you for the presentation. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. There are private townhouses on Bayview, so facing the park. They're private residences, and the north is the retail and the south is the daycare. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Correct, yes.
Right.
Okay.
Maybe
so that
I can do it. Hold on, I'm gonna do that. Yeah, I'll put it up on the screen here. Okay.
the most privileged view, one would say, is the private side facing the park. And are there any shade opportunities explored for the daycare, which I see on the south side, which you're confirming is on the south side? Receiving the most sun?
That's correct. Yeah.
So are there shade?
Yeah. I'm trying to share. Here we go. Did that work? Can you see it?
Not as yet.
Not yet.
There?
Your screen?
This one?
Yeah.
Sorry. Did I go there? Did I go there?
Yeah.
All right, hold on. Get rid of that on my meeting. Okay, here. So here you have the daycare, and you have the townhouses, and you have the CRUs. And the question is, do we have shading opportunity for the outdoor play area?
And the daycare.
Is that the question?
Yes, that is the question.
We haven't got to that level of detail yet. We've just settling on the massing concept now and trying to make it fit in the larger urban design context. The daycare is something we're exploring, and once we get to that next stage, and we will start to look at those sort of issues. That's a good point.
Thank you. Is there a reason that the daycare was not considered for the facing the park side? So in other words, on
we did look at it. I think one of the challenges there is just the narrow setback to the property line. We have more room in terms of outdoor area on the south side,
We don't own this bit.
As well as there is more opportunity for solar exposure on the south side. Also, the grades along Mill Street are quite flat, whereas they slope quite a bit on Bayview Avenue, and it would be quite challenging to get a level floor at one level with the outdoor area on Bayview Avenue.
The last question I have is there, again, this may be out of, you're not there yet, but just appreciate knowing, are there shaded opportunities for either natural vegetation or trellised vegetation that would be seasonal on the roof amenities?
We will look into that. That's a great idea.
Thank you.
Yes. Patty?
All my questions have been answered. Thank you.
Hey, Matthew, welcome back.
Just one question from the previous comments from the panel back in March 2020. There was the general consideration for the memory of the site prior to European settlement. And I wanted to ask if that's been considered, and if yes, how those comments have been considered in the revised plan.
No, it has not been considered yet. We've been doing a lot of work trying to make this financially viable. Given the current economic climate and the construction costs, things like the internal parkade above grade are part of that, as well as a thinning of the street of the net to gross in terms of the depth of the street wall buildings and the units has been really a very serious calculation. We will get to the next stage of the architecture in the coming design development, and that's something that we'll keep in mind. Thank you. What you see today is a revised massing, which has tried to fit into the context better, which is what we were asked to do, and to land the density in a way that is financially viable.
Hey, Gina?
Can you share, thank you for the presentation. Can you share what your aspirational soil volume is for both the on-grade planting and also the roof deck? I know you shared sections of the streetscape, but not of the roof deck profile. So just curious what your goal is there and what you're achieving.
Yeah, I can talk about
soil.
Yeah, soil volume per tree.
Yeah, the soil volume, as we have kind of conceptually looked at this so far, we are achieving the required levels per TGS. But of course, we've for the larger plantings and shade tree plantings on the roof decks, we'll be looking at making sure we have enough soil for that as well. But that it just needs a further detailed study. But we're not quite there yet. But we're comfortable that we're hitting the targets.
And I can add to that as well that we will be mounding up some areas as landscape shows for soil. And you can see from the section as well that we have some transfer beams below the residential. It also means that allows areas for pockets because we have additional height there. So there is room within the center under the courtyard to be able to have additional depth as required as we go through.
Okay, Kevin.
Thanks. You had mentioned that you were going to do an LCA. You're going to look at embodied carbon. What's the target intensity that you're looking at?
I think that still needs to be determined with our sustainability consultants, but certainly we want to try to reduce it as much as possible. To be able to reduce, and I think there's a number of strategies that were presented last time, like concrete with low embodied carbon, with things like carbon cure and such. We do want to look at all strategies to be able to minimize as much as possible.
Thanks. You mentioned that for your systems, you're using a water source heat pump. Is that a ground source system?
I think at this point we're still exploring kind of what the options are. I don't believe it's not currently ground source heat pump. But that's something that we need to develop further at the next stage.
And they're very early days. We have to yeah. It's been a long time, but we're just getting started again.
Well, I'm just trying to understand the project a little bit. Can you go back or maybe one more slide after this? You say high efficiency water source heat pump. What's the heat source?
The heat source are plant.
Okay, go for it, Aileen.
She's here.
Yeah. Sorry. We had trouble attending the meeting earlier, but like we weren't let in. Sorry for being late, but I can answer any question about the energy strategies. And currently, yes, we are aiming water source heat pumps, but it will be condensing boilers with high efficiency, seasonal efficiency as of now. But we'll be considering and doing the feasibility studies for geothermal as well.
That's good to hear. So you're saying you're gonna fire a water loop with condensing boilers, and you're gonna have decentralized heat pumps off that loop?
True, correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, let's go online. Let's see. Pina, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
All right.
Thank
any
you very
questions?
much. Yeah, I have a question about, it's not it's maybe an extension of some of my colleagues' questions, but based on all of the images of the new iteration of what you call the tectonic strategy, the articulation of the architecture, there's no distinction programmatically, or there's no inflection or reverberation when program changes. So it looks from the renderings, especially, that whether it's retail, townhouse, residential lobby, or daycare, the architecture is articulated the same as it hits the ground. Is that to give flexibility in terms of that changing program, or maybe the contentious private, residential on the park?
We're still early days, but the daycare has been moving around, and so that will adapt depending on where it lands. And where it currently lands has not been fully developed. We're still in early days. There was originally two tectonics. We had one for the townhouses and one for the retail that was different. Our client expressed the desire for a smaller scale retail expression, very much like the townhouses. And as we start to develop the architecture, we'll look at that again. That's a very good comment. But for the moment, we wanted to simplify the tectonic down to tell a story which allowed us to express sort of the nature of the building irrespective of program. Like many buildings in Europe or whatever, you'll have street wall buildings that could be anything from retail to residential to even institutional uses that all incorporate a very similar facade. We haven't gotten to the idea of expressing them individually, but that's a really good point, and we'll look at it a little further when we get to the next stage.
Okay. Dana, are you there? Oh, she's still there. No? Betsy? Oh.
No questions, thank you.
Sorry. Oh, sorry, Paul, I didn't hear you call my name.
No, do you have any questions?
I do. I have two really brief questions. So thank you for the presentation. The first one is the daycare confirmed as part of the program, and it's just finding where it lands that's up in the air at the moment?
No, it's not
I'm
confirmed.
going to let our client answer that.
It's not confirmed yet.
No, the answer is no.
Okay. And the second question, you in the shadow studies, you do a good job of showing where the shadow will be cast on Corktown Commons, but there was I didn't hear anything about the fourth floor roof courtyard, and you show quite extensive landscaping there, and I'm wondering how much solar access is that actually going to get, given the massing that's surrounding it?
Here you can see really well here what's happening in summer. It's going to get sun in the morning, which is really, really good into the inner courtyard, and then it's going to free up in the afternoon as well. So it's well placed compared to where it was before. Like it's going to get afternoon sun here, and then we didn't do the morning here for you, but we'll have to. We can. Most of the shadowing is going to come from other buildings, as you can see as well too. Here you can see that this is in March. In March, 2 in the afternoon. Earlier in the morning, you're going to get sun coming in. We haven't done those shadows for here because nobody has asked that question as a concern, but it's far superior to where it was before. We used to have what was it, How many?
8 stories.
8-story.
I think it was
8-story. We used to have 8-story cross section. Here, we can
And
show
now we
you.
have 2, right, Gregory?
And now we have 3.
Yeah.
So there's 3 stories here. We used to have 8 stories all the way around, and this used to be down at the bottom here, and this was higher. So we've lowered this down to 6 stories, and we've raised it up 3 stories here. And so in terms of light, it's infinitely better than what it was. You can see the sort of stepping in behind. And so we were just very pleased. We've done much better. We'll look at it a little more closely, but in the next stage.
Just sorry, one last question to follow up on that. So I guess this is for Knack. Is the landscape aspirational photographs that you showed us, is that is that achievable given what you understand of how much sunlight that
Yes.
courtyard will get, or that remains aspirational? And in the next set of design development drawings, we'll see what's actually achievable.
I think it's very close to what is achievable. We do have a lot more sun than before. So the images, yes, they're aspirational, but we're confident that we'll be able to achieve most of that. That's for sure. Yeah.
Thanks.
We'd love to have all this planting in the middle. We would love that.
Yeah. Betsy, I heard you don't have any questions?
No, Paul, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Emily, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Any questions?
No, my questions have been answered. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, I guess let's go to comments.
Sure. So first of all, I'm really happy that there's a proposal for this site. It's such a privileged location, and it's kind of like a missing piece. And, you know, Corktown Common is just a beloved space within both the city and part of Waterfront. I think the kind of commitment to public art that happens along Front Street, all that is so good. And I guess I feel like, I would love to see not just private residential looking onto the park. I just think that there's a kind of a whole arc that you know could be viable retail of some kind. The potential for using smaller sizes so that it doesn't have to be big floor plates, and really engendering a level of community retail that just doesn't exist right now along Front Street. Like we've seen so many, like we've seen all the different projects come along. Can we put a grocery store? Can we not put a grocery? Like there's been a whole kind of discussion. And in a way, I mean, I would love to see a much more robust retail sort of life along Front Street. And then I just feel like for me, when I see residential townhouses fronting on what is a major public park in the city, you know, it's not it just, for me, it just feels like it needs to have a more public presence. For sure, it needs to be viable, and you know, that goes without saying. When I look at the massing along that it's trying to mimic the KPMB building and a pairing, I could see it go higher than 16 floors. I could see you not dropping down at the corner and actually continuing that massing to the corner of Tannery. I feel like there's a kind of robust scale that could really just give you more units and more people in that location and not suffer urbanistically at all. But for me, then it would require kind of really making the retail really work along that whole front side of the park, and allowing, you know, because in a way what happens is people go to the park, if they're not in the neighborhood, there's almost no amenity other than the park. And so this kind of idea that the park becomes a part of a richer public realm, and that you don't have townhouses looking onto it, but you know, and there can be lots of residential on it, but just that street related condition is so set up throughout this whole neighborhood for the side streets, for a whole set of other conditions, but there's a kind of big P public for that whole stretch and that arc of Corktown Common. So I feel like for me, it's just really disappointing to see such a privileged public site that is this kind of arcing condition, the ending of Front Street, and you got a bunch of townhouses. It just, I feel like that just doesn't feel right. And I would be so happy to imagine much bigger massing along front that doesn't have to be matchy to north side to the south side. And that robustness I see as a positive thing. I think the raised courtyard, putting at grade parking, totally really good moves for the project that makes it viable and super supportive of that. I think that for me, the issue of the homogeneity of massing is maybe something in this location you really want to think about, because this kind of question of you need to sort of look at the arc of the building to the north and how that horizontality comes across, how you read that almost as a kind of continuous facade and certain horizontal datums from the north building to the south building continuing, while they can be different expressions, color, texture, but this kind of, there's certain horizontals that that existing building sets up. So I guess I'm saying on one hand, you could actually have a higher massing in your gateway condition, but that there are certain street related things. You want your building to contribute to being a positive addition to the public realm. It's like this missing piece. You have a Front Street elevation, the Bayview elevation, and then the Mill Street elevation. It's like a prow, and each one needs to work really hard to make it's like this missing piece of community that is really set up. And it's like a remaining site, and then you have this amazing location on the park. And I just feel like it right now is seeing the park as a throwaway, and it's not seeing it as this huge asset and benefit. And then for me, the kind of issue of thermally broken balconies, I know you have fewer of them, but I can't even kind of believe that we're talking about a not thermally broken balcony in 2024. And I've heard from so many other developers. I've been sitting at this table a long time, and I just feel like it's totally unsustainable to even say that, especially when you consider the width of the units, and most people, that's their primary view. And then you're making like a little kind of conductor and bringing, like, it just, you can have all the other strategies, but if you don't actually think about a way to balance and have, thermally broken balconies, I feel like it's a very flawed sustainability strategy in 2024. So I think it's a huge improvement from the previous scheme. We want to ensure its success. And for me, there's a kind of higher massing that could actually benefit the development, but also contribute to a kind of density. You're adding density, but you're also wanting intensity of ground floor use and of the public realm. So that equation for me is kind of essential to really making this last privileged location totally successful and really adding to the kind of quality of life of this neighborhood.
Okay, thanks.
Are we allowed to reply to this?
No, we're going through questions, and then I'll summarize at the end, and then I'll give you an opportunity to respond to what you heard.
Yeah, I think that the above grade parking is a very big change to the project.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a good one. It's already a very, very large site. And when you do it, it becomes a mega site. And I want to remind my panel members that we were talking earlier about disconnecting public realm criteria beyond street right-of-ways, but mid-block connections and courtyards, disconnecting that from a kind of zoning process and what that results in. And I think what we're sitting here today seeing is the result of that. So you no longer had that the fine-grained sort of movement through the site, which is already been set up with a number of the other blocks in the Canary District. So yeah, I think it's a really big mistake.
Okay, Nina Marie.
Thank you very much for addressing some of these comments and the project so far. I agree very much with the previous two comments that were just made, so I don't need to repeat them. I will say, though, that with some of the plans that are going forward, if the daycare is confirmed and if it is indeed locating on the south side, there is an important need to provide shade on the south side. Going forward, we will see, and we are seeing in international conversations, the rights to shade. It is a human right, particularly under programs for urban cooling and the recognition of temperature increase in the summertime. So balancing the right to shade with solar access in the winter is really important. And this is both an architectural strategy and a landscape strategy. I would really encourage you to consider ways in which to do this through the use of strategically planted deciduous trees where possible. Certainly within the street trees are one possibility, but the other is really lovely architectural structures that allow trellised shade in the summer, including the use of plant material, vegetation that will provide that, and in the winter, let the sun in that you want for solar access. So that winter solar access and summer right to shade is a really important balancing act, and I think one that your landscape in conjunction with architecture can do beautifully when thoughtfully done.
Okay, thank you. Patty?
Thanks for the presentation. I also agree with previous comments. I want to emphasize the potential of increasing the height of the building from 17 to more. I think this kind of symmetrical gateway is a little bit of a kind of like a red herring in a way that I think that the density could be moved around in a way that still echoes this idea of a gateway on Bayview, but then breaks it up in different ways. So that symmetry is not necessarily all that critical. I absolutely, I'm really excited about an idea of a daycare coming to the site. I think that will really add an extra level of activation that is necessary and exciting. And a daycare doesn't necessarily have a prescribed floor plan. So when you were saying it's too narrow, it could still be narrow and find ways to actually extend outdoor play areas that might be not just connected to the park across the street, but also around the bend. So fronting the daycare to the park is both exciting, an exciting idea, but also ones in which the footprint or the floor plan of the daycare doesn't necessarily have to follow some kind of preconceived standard of a width. So plus having the townhomes front on a quieter street like Mill Street might just make a bit more sense. But with that in mind, I agree that the kind of porosity through the site is absolutely critical. So if this is not achieved by removing the above ground parking, then there should be some ways that we can access through the block, maybe through an arcade of some sort, maybe retail that opens onto space within the block, so it could be covered. So some kind of combination of an indoor, outdoor arcade space that allows for through connections, even if there was parking that remained above ground. But this idea of a porosity through the block is really, really critical. And yeah, so these are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, Matthew?
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to start by saying that I don't believe that financial viability and Indigenous inclusion are mutually exclusive. In fact, I believe that by acknowledging the importance of this place and better understanding the history of its people and the natural history of the place, and the values of Indigenous knowledge that are embedded in this place, that we can only add value and with that efficiency to the projects that we're building. So making decisions without acknowledging the importance of people in place mean that this Indigenous values of the building and the landscape are going to be tacked on later. This is something that we're trying to change. I want to remind you of the importance of this place as well. This is the mouth of the Don River. This is in floodlands. This is a very unique site that looks onto a park and then looks right onto the river. Even though the river is controlled, it's still extremely important to acknowledge this. And I would encourage the design team to take a look at that further and really educate yourselves about those aspects. It's been over 2 years since this is coming to the panel. It's really discouraging to hear that nothing has been said about indigeneity at all. Really disappointing to me. I want to also encourage NAC, the landscape team, to think beyond the property line. This is a moment where we're just constrained into these edges, and you can see that in the diagrams that have been provided. But this is a continuation of an area. It's a continuation of a park. It should be connected. We should be thinking about it and showing it that way.
Okay, thank you very much. Jana?
Thank you for the presentation. I think it's great to see the architectural development. I felt like the landscape development is really not as complete as I would have loved at schematic design to really understand and evaluate human comfort, aesthetics, kind of long-term success. I think there's also just a challenge of showing us a lot of different kinds of drawings that don't agree with each other. So the renderings showed a lot of like treescape on the roof and made it look very verdant, especially along the park edge, but the plan disagreed with that, showing that as sort of a treeless pool deck edge. Those sorts of that's sort of challenging to the reading of the space and how it's operating. Showing us the landscape sections through the sidewalk where it's easier to accomplish soil volume rather than showing us also where it's really hard on the roofscape to make sure that that planting will be successful long-term and provide that shade that Nina Marie talked about that's so important. And then I think relying on precedents to show the character of the landscape just would have been lovely to see a more complete picture of the landscape so we could evaluate and kind of offer more critical thinking to your process. So those are my comments. Thank you for sharing.
Evan?
Thank you. I think I want to talk just a little bit about the heat pump system that you're proposing for the building. I do recognize that you've been grandfathered into old TGS performance targets. I guess maybe I'm tired of saying it, but we have to stop burning fossil fuels. We don't have to burn fossil fuels to deliver comfort and safety for humans. But having said that, the system that you've selected, I think there's a lot of opportunity. So you have this decentralized heat pump system, which is great. That system operates on an ambient loop, so you can move heat around the building where you have simultaneous heating and cooling. I think that's very intelligent. I guess what I would do is I would plead with you that you're firing that system with a natural gas boiler. Could you possibly put in a connection for future air source heat pump as Toronto heats up? That system actually works very, very well with the geo-exchange system, and maybe you could even parcel it out to a third party that can own it and lease it back to the project. That would work very, very well. And then you would lower that greenhouse gas intensity, which for me is the most important metric. But if that's not feasible, at least put into the schematic of the system to future-proof it so that system can be easily electrified, and you can decommission that boiler in the future. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to go online. Pina.
Yes, hi. I do want to echo what many of my colleagues had mentioned already, especially with respect to the porosity, the through block sort of porosity, I think is critical so that this doesn't become a kind of boulder right at Corktown Commons. Certainly really addressing not only the park, which is the most important and I think the most missed opportunity so far, but also I actually appreciate the location of the daycare where it is now, given that the future school across the street. However, this aspect of a right to shade, the summer shade and winter sun, needs to be, I think, integral with the design and with the architecture, as should be the different animation and address of the public realm at Corktown, and even the whole retail rationale, canopies and setbacks along Front Street. So I guess I would really just urge the design team to consider these aspects as not afterthoughts or add-ons, but actually completely integrated with the architecture. I love the nimbleness the team, demonstrated with just completely being creative about the whole tectonic approach. I mean, like totally like the whole codification of the charcoal and the silver as having that rationale. It can't stop at this formal consideration. It really needs to dissipate completely, saturate, through the programmatic decisions and creative process as well. I think that that piece, the idea, I guess, of this, I'm very intrigued by the idea of this being this kind of unanimous treatment that could in future have different programs. I'm very intrigued by that, but I guess I need a little more convincing.
Hey, Jana, are you there? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and thank you for the presentation again. And I want to, I won't repeat what my colleagues have said. I just want to go a little bit deeper into something Bridget was talking about, the public realm. And I think that's about, you know, your response to fitting into the context that you said you're really trying hard to do. And I can see on a larger scale, all of the manipulation of the massing to get something tectonically satisfying is really evident. But I think in the public realm, at the street and person scale, there is not nearly the kind of development that needs to be put towards this scheme. This block is really unique. It's almost an object building as much as it is a terminus and a gateway to the rest of the precinct. And I think it would be really useful for you to think about the west side, the south side, the east side, the north side, and all of the differences and opportunities that come from those differences. So to me, the west side, the towns facing the towns, well, that's an opportunity to really dial down the scale and think about your west elevation responding to the townhouses across the street and not mimicking them, but actually augmenting the experience of going down that street where you have smaller scale residential. On the south side, I'm going to disagree about having the daycare there, because I think having an outdoor daycare space on the majority of that street on the south side colonizes that street. You're going to get an incredible friction with the privacy and security that's required for a daycare, an outdoor daycare space, that's going to be at odds with a public street facing onto a really public program like a school and a community center. I would say put the daycare playground on the roof, and then design the south ground public realm so that it responds to the public nature of a community center and school across the street, and ways that you can engage that. On the east side, Corktown Commons is one of the most extraordinary parks in the city. I think if you're going to put townhouses there, they have to be able to be retail as much as they're residential. Maybe they're dually zoned, so that small scale coffee shops and other amenities that's kind of missing for the park can be added there and enrich the park and enrich the scale of the public realm, thinking about that. And finally, I would say with Corktown Common, I think you really need to draw it more than a generic park. There's nothing in any of your drawings that indicates or alludes the magic of Corktown Commons and the subtle changes both in the landscaping and in the topography. And I would take that as my clue for how to look at the east side public realm with respect to the street and person scale. And then on the north side on Front Street, I think there's got to be a lot more detail. Like the gradient between the public and the private is not developed, I think, on all four sides, but particularly on Front Street. There's got to be a lot more sophistication in terms of the richness that you can attenuate that band of real estate between the building face and the sidewalk. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you. Emily, you there?
Yep. Hi, thanks for the presentation. I want to underscore what Jenna just said as well as all the others in terms of activating the Bayview Avenue and that relationship with Corktown Common, and especially what Jenna just said about understanding the kind of DNA of Corktown. One thing that I think is really important is that as you're looking at the massing of the building, to think of the park also and the massing of that, because there's actually a quite dramatic piece of topography that's just right across the street that has a different kind of elevation to it, that has a different kind of relationship with the building that is super important to be able to be responding to. And I think that that's something that would really start to inform what you do on that, the Bayview Avenue. I also think the way that Jenny, you were just talking about the relationship with the community center and the school and the park as well. I really feel like everything is zoned from every side and not really thought of as a full kind of condition around the context of it that you need to be responding to. So I would encourage you to kind of rethink that whole realm and then think about how the privatization of that with the townhouses, it feels very uncomfortable for me with Bayview Avenue. So a lot of people have talked about that, but I would underscore that as well in terms of its relationship to the park. I do appreciate the shade sun shadow diagrams that you presented, and I'm happy to see that that's been really thought about in terms of the impact on the park. I also want to underscore something that Gina said about the other aspects of the landscape on the roofs and in the courtyard. I do think that there needs to be a whole lot more study and development of what you are implying with the images that you're showing and whether technically you can actually achieve it with the soil depths and all of that. Especially for the courtyard, the references that you're showing of the Monk's Garden in Boston, and the density of planting that really needs to achieve that. In plan, the trees are kind of located at a much wider spacing. You're not going to get the kind of density and that kind of immersive quality of the landscape, which I think is a really fantastic way of thinking about that courtyard, especially now that it has more light to it, and to be able to actually have that kind of found landscape deep within the building. But you really need to be able to pull that off. You have to think about soil volume and also density of the planting. And I do also wonder, what your overall concept and narrative is in terms of your planting and the approach of it. I think that we originally saw this 2 years ago. There was some discussion of native or adaptive planting palette, and I was a little disappointed to not hear about any of that within the presentation of what you've been thinking about with that and how that responds to the larger context of the Dawnlands. So I think that there's just more, drilling down into understanding the context that you're working within. I think that there's been a lot of study about the massing of context, but I'm also now encouraging you to look more at the landscape context that you're working within. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Betsy?
Thank you. Thanks to my colleagues too for having such great comments today. What we're benefiting, and we're passing on to you the benefit of having learned from this neighborhood over the last number of years, this being essentially the last big site. So a lot of the comments that you're hearing, I think, are reflective of us reflecting on how this piece of city has turned out and how it's evolved over the last few years. I won't repeat any of my colleagues' comments. Two new ones are that this neighborhood has a really robust and excellent art program, and I was wondering if your site is taking part in that, if you have that piece as part of, if that's on your list. And the second one is regarding the, I'll reinforce again, the public realm, the first floor of your building being probably the most important floor. And then this facade that is fronting onto the park. I have a huge question mark around the gray and the white brick strategy. It's kind of so simplistically didactic. I can't and there's so much gray and white brick in this neighborhood. All of the buildings across the street are gray and white. The next building down is kind of a white building with the balconies. I'm not sure that we found magic in gray and white brick, maybe aside from the Saucier Perrot buildings, which have a really strong formal expression, which I'm gathering is not going to be possible in these buildings. That this kind of, I think this facade, especially the one facing the park, has to have a little bit more magic in it. Maybe it's giving some setbacks so that planting can happen on multiple floors coming up, maybe terracing that facade a little bit so it almost feels like a green hill in a sense, to mimic the Emily's beautiful hill on the other side. But I think there's something really missing from this facade that's not going to come out of how much time and energy you spend into creating this the white and gray brick facades. I think it has to be a bigger, bolder move, like a really robust, big massing move, potentially integrated with landscape that gets you there. Other than that, thank you so much for the presentation. It'll be exciting to see this project come through. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I think that's everyone, unless anyone else has any other comments. I know Marie, you have to leave at 4:30, so I
So
understand.
we apologize for
It's
stepping
already passed. So I'm going to do my best to try and make sense of all this and summarize where we are. And I'm going to start with saying that many people have said, we've had the advantage for the last 10 years, give or take, of seeing this neighborhood evolve from industrial wasteland to an interesting neighborhood. And we've learned a lot of lessons along the way. And as many people have said, it's a unique block, last big site, amazing location, and with all that goes great expectations. So that's what I think I want to just lay on the table in terms of the nature of the comments today. A number of things were said that I'm not going to repeat all of them, but basically perhaps the most dominant comment was the land use proposed that is facing the park. Many people have said need a lot more energy, more intensity, ground floor should have a mix of retail, perhaps mixed use, combined CR, something unique that has got some energy to it, because townhouses would be lovely sitting in a townhouse looking over the park, but it doesn't feel like it's bold enough, and there's not going to be enough energy created with that land use. So that was the first, I think, major comment. The second one that I've heard was a support, I think a consensus for bigger massing on the Front Street Gateway, feeling that if you take a taller building, if you take a bigger building, it doesn't have to exactly match the building to the north side. So that was the second general overall theme. A third was in terms of the need, sort of people expressing the need for a finer grain porosity through the site. And that seemed to have been lost. And if there's a way to integrate that into this thinking and this version of this site plan, I think that would be very welcome. You've heard comments about the parking above grade. Some people thought it was okay because the deck is much higher and it gets greater sunlight exposure. Other people felt that it was a bad move. And so I think there's two perspectives there. And I guess, we've all seen buildings with both examples. They can work if they're done right, or they cannot work. So somewhat mixed opinion there. Also, with respect to the daycare, everybody loves the idea of having a daycare use in this block for sure. And I think the relationship to the school is important whenever that comes. But there was some commentary that perhaps the daycare should be in another use. If in fact the parking is above grade, maybe it makes sense to have the daycare, accessing onto the roof top of that parking, if that is the ultimate solution. So somewhat mixed opinion there. Much stronger attention and support for the public realm all around the block, I think, was a consistent comment. rethink the relationship to the park. It's a missed opportunity at this point in time. The comment was made about take advantage of the indigenous memory of this site, going right back at the mouth of the Don, the transformation that's taken place, and the opportunities to incorporate that memory into this building and into this block should be considered. You've heard comments about greenhouse gas emissions, body carbon studies, obviously maximize the potential for minimizing greenhouse gas emissions, and whatever system is finally adopted for this particular block. Also, a comment about the colors, I guess, of the gray and white, the contrasting and of the buildings. Whether, and I can relate to this, if you look around the neighborhood, there's a lot of gray and white buildings, and perhaps it makes more sense to have a bigger, bolder strategy here for the materiality and the color of those buildings. I think that was a comment that was expressed. Also, a concern over the thermal broken balconies. We've heard this consistently throughout all of the buildings that have been proposed in this neighborhood. And in this day and age, we think it's time, obviously, to address that once and for all. And I guess overall, we understand where this is. It's been a long process. You're going through the second site plan resubmission. I think I'm going to go back to one point that was made in terms of height. We think there's some flexibility in terms of height here, as you've heard. And I assume that the zoning has been approved, otherwise you wouldn't be going through site plan. I just want to clarify that. Is that?
You might be doing the rezone. Are you doing the rezoning and the site plan?
Is it doing
at the same
done
time?
together?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So there's still, that hasn't been finalized yet. Okay. So there is some flexibility to do that. So many more small comments, but I think those are the major ones that I just wanted to get across. And I think the question is, we want our comments to be helpful as possible at this point in time. And it sounds like you're still quite a ways away from finalizing this. So we need to decide on our vote of the panel. And quite frankly, from what I've heard, I hear two votes. I hear a conditional support. Some of the things that have been done are supportive, and others are not. And I think the only fair way is to go around the room and just see whether or not there is support for conditional support as we see this project to date, with all our comments in mind that we want to see addressed and it comes back, or not. So I'm going to put that on the table first and take a vote. Are there, and online as well, I need to hear from people here, but let's just do in the panel. Who would support conditional support at this point in time? Okay. Online? Anyone would support conditional? No comment? No? Emily? And Pina? Did I see you correct? No? Okay.
Jana.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
Betsy?
I'd be conditional too.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure we got this fair. Okay. so
Did
we
you
got-
get my hand up, Paul?
Yeah. Emily, Jana, Betsy, and Pina, conditional support. Okay, that's 4. Okay.
I put up my hand too.
And okay, and on this panel, anyone else here?
Conditional.
Yeah, okay. So that's 5. Who would vote non-support at this point in time? 2, 3, 4, 5.
Leon, what do we do?
We're at a stalemate.
Can I say
Oh.
something? Can I speak up? Am I allowed to talk?
You will in a second. You will in a
I
second.
think this is an important junction for me to say something. I really do. With respect. No, I'm not allowed. Betsy's waving no.
Well, I would like to conclude this vote.
We just need to work it out.
And we
No,
have
but
no,
I think
Sorry. All right, I'll let you speak now.
Thank you. Thank you. I just got to say one thing. We've been working at this for a long time, and we agree with the panel on many of the aspects of the things that you've been saying. We've been working with Waterfront Toronto and the city and the community and our client, and there's a myriad of opinions that have been thrown at us, as you can imagine. And the consensus of the opinion, believe it or not, other than yourselves today, has that the building has to look like all the other buildings, right? Okay, so we've been discouraged from many of the things that you've asked us to look at by other people, be it the city, and we've tried redistributing the density in different ways. We've tried adding more color and doing more adventurous things. We've tried all these things, and we had nothing but non-support from everything from the city and in terms of that sort of direction. So while we sympathize with everything that you're saying, you're handcuffing us a bit in the sense that we promise we are on side to do as many of the things that you'd like to see happen as we would, but we need to have the ability to move forward to work those things out in a way that allows some of them to be achieved, but maybe not all of them. And I know that our hearts are with you in trying to do the best thing for this site and make it unique. And I think we've heard that, and we'll take that back to our client and the city and Waterfront Toronto and see if we can get some support for doing something more adventuresome in that way. And we would honestly hear you. We honestly do hear you. And I think we're saying because I've never been turned down a design panel in 35 years.
I'm not sure adventuresome is the direction that we were giving today. So I don't think that would be the right direction. I'd be okay to change my vote to non-support to break the tie, just to kind of solidify our panel's kind of fundamental comments on some of these issues.
Anyone else? I know this is, back and forth here. I want to give encouragement to move forward. And what I want to see, the bottom line is, I want to see these comments addressed. Like, almost the vote is,
I think we've all heard really strongly that the sustainability aspects of the project, the Indigenous aspects that should be incorporated into the project, the articulation of the massing of the project. There's a lot of that gray charcoal stuff that's everywhere. So the articulation of the individual pieces, which I think Gregory has been talking about in some of the commentary. And then the intensity of activity and use along the park frontage is something that's also a major element. So I think those were just the main elements that kept coming up in all the commentary, and I think that those help to summarize. I think that we're having some issues internally with regard to this concept of raising the underground parking above ground, and for just exactly what Pat said, then you don't have the porosity and you don't have sort of the accessibility, the access to the block that you would normally have if that space was at grade, right? If it's elevated, you can't get there. You're not part of it. It doesn't belong to the public realm. So
and the worry is, in my mind, in terms of process, if the team is poised to put in a revised site plan application right now, which means that above grade parking becomes institutionalized within the project, that would be a problem in my mind at this point.
Just to help, this is kind of unusual, but it's really important. The city, obviously, you're going through rezoning and site plan at the same time, and the city has not finalized that rezoning as yet. Is that correct?
I'm not sure what point the project is at, but there's concurrent, because you came in 2 years ago, so you have a concurrent application. It's zoning and site plan, whereas now it has to be broken up into two. Right, yeah.
We've split them up into two now.
But you don't have the zoning in place as yet.
No, we're trying to get zoning.
All
I
right.
think
Say something else?
No, I just wanted to point out that the process there, because does the zoning shrink wrap it once you get it? And then that above grade parking is there for good, right?
In this case, the zoning and the site plan will be one, that they'll be approved together. They will be approved together, yeah.
Okay, so any other commentary? Otherwise, we're gonna finalize this vote and then we'll go from here.
I can say, Paul, it's difficult for me to support a project where we identified issues and they weren't addressed, Indigenous issues specifically, and ways of thinking about them.
Okay, and Betsy, you have changed your vote?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so then it would appear that the vote is now 6-5 for non-support. So I think that's where we are. So all I can say is that, you know, there are a lot of good comments here that were made. We know you want to address them. You want them to be, you know, translated. You want this to be the best thing it can possibly be. It is a unique block. And like I said, there's great expectations with this last block. And I think we're confident that you can rise to that occasion, but we hope these comments will be helpful. And that's what we'll look to see. So I think that concludes the discussion. Okay. So I think with no other business, the meeting is adjourned.